So what are we going over today? We're going over the overview, the meta of the entire syllabus, the journey through it, not necessarily focusing on the actual technical information of how to do certain exercises. I don't know how much time today is going to take. We haven't run one of these training courses for about 2 years, and it's evolved a lot over lockdown and everything. So I'm just going to start at the beginning, try and get through as far as we can. If we finish it early, we finish it early. If we don't finish it, all of it, then we'll just do the second half in another month or so or something. You are absolutely free, and it's very important to me that you ask me questions, because what is becoming quite clear is that as we reach a higher resolution of understanding with the syllabus, my explanations need to be absolutely on point. And the only way I'm going to know if I'm not explaining it in a way that you can understand is if you stop me and ask me any questions, right? So without further delay, thank you, Michelle, for finally doing the layout on what is 6 years of work now. So we have, next slide, Shell.
Let me see if your little button works.
Yeah. All right. So this page is the index, and this entire manual is actually an interactive PDF, which is meant to be on your phones, and you can literally just, if I just come around to this side here, I should probably use a really good glow stick or some sort, and I think for the purposes of, we shall use red. So you can see the main thing to remember when you get this PDF on your phones is it's got this key down the side. So next slide, previous slide, you've got a button that takes you back to the matrix, which we'll show you in a second. This button here will always bring you back to this index page, no matter what page you're on. If you're in class and you need to quickly check something, you click the index page, it brings you straight back here. All the principles and the essential topics are listed here. And if you click on the matrix, it will take you to the exercise matrix, which we will come to shortly. I want to try and get through all of those today as fast as possible. So without further ado, moving on. There's a lot of this stuff is taken directly from the website. The website and the instruction manual have come together to form this document. What is LED Sabre? Does anybody want to read this? No, I have to read this out, right? Do I have to read this out? Yes, I do. Yeah. Look, in a nutshell, we're trying to set out what it is for our competitors, our potential partners, for students, for instructors. It's a new combat sport designed to create epic duels with beautiful weapons of light, right? And that sort of sets it out. We are tarts. We are trying to look good. We are trying to essentially show off and make ourselves look glorious for the entire planet, whilst at the same time demonstrating a capacity with ancient martial technology, right? And my argument has always been, if you do it right, it's going to look beautiful. You don't need to make it look beautiful. You just need to do it right. So express yourselves, be safe, and be entertaining, in essence, right? And we go on and we're talking about science fiction, talk about costume and the rest of it. You know all of this stuff. That's pretty straightforward. Mission statement, why do we do it? What's the point in LED Sabre in that sense? Nobody fights with swords anymore. In essence, our argument is that the sword takes us back to a place where the mind and the body have to be united, and they have to operate together in harmony. And martial arts force us into a place where we have to address the evolutionary history of our anatomical structures, and we have to also understand why our minds operate in the way that they do, and what focus is and how it's applied to reality. So in a modern world where wars are fought by remote control, where the art of sword has been functionally redundant for centuries, it may be considered that the study of traditional martial arts is unnecessary. However, as the human race continues to evolve, and as we move further and further from our evolutionary origins, our bodies become troubled by the lack of appropriate activity, and our minds become muddled by the vast amounts of information we have to process on a daily level. In order to address these concerns, we need a holistic approach to health and well-being. It is our belief that the single most effective environment for exploring all of these considerations is combat in its simplest form. Note, I did not say sports, I said combat. In order to face an intelligent opponent armed with a weapon and possessing intent, an individual will have to face challenges quite unlike anything that modern life will ever demand of its citizens. By creating a safe and educated environment in which to explore these skills and activities, we are allowing ourselves to rediscover the primary functions of our bodies and intellects, and in doing so, restore ourselves and achieve balance. Right? So it is what it says on the tin. Any questions? We good?
Are we going to get copies of this?
Yes.
Wait.
Yeah, but what I would advise you to do, there's kinetic learning, audio, visual, whatever. What my advice is, write your notes now, and then you'll get the PDF afterwards, and then you can compare your notes with the PDF. The combat system. So we have 7 levels of content. The syllabus is derived from the traditional internal art of Wuxi Tai Chi Chuan and explores the language of a two-handed, double-edged longsword. We will be performing with other types of weapons, but that is essentially what we're going to be playing with. The martial art is a system based on anatomy and does not teach any particular style of combat. It is a scientific endeavor, not fantasy, to identify and study the many variables of armed engagement, and allows each individual to discover their own nature and expression. So you've got the martial art, which is the entire syllabus from 1 to 7. You've got the competitive sport, which is specifically level 3. And you have theatrical fight performance, which is level 5. These 3 aspects of the activity are inseparable. You can't really engage in the competitive or the theatrical without the martial art, and the theatrical is unavailable without the competitive, and the competitive really without the martial arts side and the theatrical side is a very, very nasty crucible in which the ego can be twisted in quite an awkward way. So without the support of the Qigong, without the support of the fun that is the theater, the competitive side can quite often turn people quite toxic, and it's why I don't hang out in tournament scenes for that particular reason. Anybody who spends a long time around medal-winning martial artists will recognize that there is a glut of megalomania and egomania, and it's the same with football players and anybody who thinks they're the best at what they do, but doesn't realize that what they do is just a very small part of what humans are capable of. Moving forwards, the 7 levels. Blah, 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 blah. Sorry. All right, 7 levels. Now this is, I want to create a new slide for making lemonade when you're dealt lemons. This is really singularly the biggest obstacle to people's study and development is if you're going to go deep into your own mind and to your own body to try and understand it, I have really bad news for you. You are going to discover lots of things that are not wired up correctly. You are literally going to find a harvest of lemons, right? And when you get that, each lemon is going to be more bitter than the previous one. And this is what makes people quit when they're challenged. And it's really simple. If you want to understand Taoism, all you have to do is say, lemonade. It really is that straightforward. You have to change your perspective on what is challenging from something that is directly attacking you into something that is giving you an opportunity to lift yourself to a better place. Challenging. Right. Physical literacy requires a rigorous method of instruction and is amplified many times over when learning through play. We aim to change the culture of learning that people grow up with, and in doing so, allow them to evolve in ways that they may not have previously explored previously. The first thing we have to address is the belief that learning is a pyramid of ever loftier heights. This is not true. Water always nourishes at the root, no matter how tall the tree grows, and this constant spiraling back to the beginning forms a circle rather than a triangle. Students who pass a level of assessment never move on from earlier levels. Instead, they unlock access to more complicated instructions, techniques, and philosophies. Students who fail to maintain a regular practice will lose the ability to explore higher levels of training as their foundations become unstable. This collapse is the inevitable result of not appreciating that it is only through the constant practice of the foundations that one can maintain an exploration at the boundary of one's understanding. Indeed, this perspective suggests that further growth is only ever achieved by nourishing at the root rather than picking at the blossom. And just 4 days after I'd written this, Michael came and gave me 3 slaps and said, "You can't make grass grow by pulling it." It's exactly the same thing, right? This means that students need to be prepared to move down in level as well as up, depending on the circumstances of their lives, their health, and their commitment to training. All of these things will fluctuate. We accept those fluctuations. We don't judge ourselves, we adapt. We at the Silver Sabres Combat Academy welcome everyone, but on the condition that they do their best. No one gets to coast, everyone fights everyone. It's really straightforward. As instructors, your job is to recognize very carefully, and there's a thin line between the people who are at the edge of their ability and are about to fail. You have to tell them to back off, sit down, chill out. And people who literally are just turning up and can't be asked. You've got to inspire the people to train if they're not motivated to do so. And you have to be the boundary that stops people becoming so excessive that they hurt themselves by accident. They came to the class to get healthier and to be a little bit happier, and having a perspective on the overall, how it all works together, and keeping that perspective is the only way that you won't get pulled into somebody's circumstance and start believing the stories that they've told themselves. You've got to step back and see the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is it's okay to go backwards from time to time. If you're not going backwards from time to time, you're in denial, because there will be things that come up, and the only way you can fix it is you have to go back to the beginning, and you have to look at the basics over and over and over again. And each time you come to understand something new, it will change everything you've understood. Everyone happy so far? All right, it's going well, it's going well. Sorry, I am literally just reading slides at you, but...
It's almost as if you prepared a presentation.
Is that what I never go presentations. If anybody told me I had to sit there and have slides read to me, I would leave.
It's not supposed to be.
All right, okay. All right, so what have we got? The core syllabus, right? This is something So Boz was making a few comments and stuff, and that's when I realized I haven't gone over this in detail with people for a long time, and not much of it has changed really. Level 1 is the same as we've been doing at Comic-Cons. But I think the thing that people need to appreciate is that you have a very high resolution understanding of level 1, and you deliver it like literally in crayon resolution when you're at Comic-Con, right? But actually, if we look at the previous slide where I was talking about having to come back, this is going to get more and more high tech. Each time you come back to level 1, you're going to have a more refined understanding of it each time. So you can't disregard, like this thing on Friday where I was talking about the way that you hold the saber in your hand. And if you're thumb to forefinger or thumb to middle finger, it's going to dictate the maximum angle of the saber relative to the forearm. This is actually the first bullet point on level 1. It's the first bullet point, and it has been for the last 5 or 6 years. And I haven't changed the instruction. It's been the same. But when you get to that point where that piece of information is now the thing that's the fulcrum around which your understanding is going to evolve, we're back to level 1. And you're making that correction in level 1. And where's it going to emerge? It's going to emerge in the ring, it's going to emerge in your linear geometry, and it's going to ultimately emerge in a larger arc in your theatrical performance, because you changed which finger your thumb was connected to at level 1. This is mind-blowing stuff. But the whole point here is it's not actually a circle, it's a spiral. Because if it's a circle in this dimension, but time travels here. So each time you're coming back to the circle, it's actually a spiral. And you're just moving forwards through time and increasing the resolution every time you complete an orbit. Level 1, the saber. Level 2 is all about the posture. We should traditionally teach the posture first. We would teach walking before we even give someone a saber. But this traditional method will not work in 2022 with people who can order pizza with a touch on their phone. It's not going to happen. You need to give them some candy at the beginning in order for them to engage in the syllabus. You have to keep it fun. You have to keep it fun. So we give them the sabers right at the beginning, but then we also have to keep it safe. So they're not allowed to fight until they get to level 3. Level 2 is the hard work. Level 2 is the really tough work. Level 3 is just having fun, getting to social events and doing tournaments and stuff. Level 4 is where it kind of really turns into a martial art. Level 5 is where it becomes wushu. We have our display work. Don't worry, each of these has a separate slide that's coming up. Level 6 is your anatomy and physiology, which if you don't understand, you are ultimately going to come stuck with interpreting certain instructions and techniques, because you need to understand the bones and the muscles in order to understand why a head cut and a lateral cut are not delivered in the same volumes, right? And then finally, we have level 7, which takes us through the mind. And for that, I have now managed to convince Michael to come along and provide us with the Qigongs that are specifically geared towards sword artists. We don't have that Qigong set yet. That is, until Michael has done that for us, I'm just going to make stuff up as we go along, right? I'll get it 80% right, but I would rather get it 98% right by getting Michael's opinion and his feedback. But it's obviously, it's going to take years, but nobody's at that level anyway, so it doesn't matter. Right, okay, moving forward. The saber. I'm going to bang through these slides, right? First of all, before we start on the content of the 7 levels of the syllabus, any questions? Okay, so level one. What is level one? Why do we teach it the way that we teach it? Hands up. Boom, tish. What do we do in level one? Speak loud. It is foundations, that's right. The main thing about level one, the reason it has the shape that it does, is it's about introducing people to what we do. It's no more than that. And to be honest, you know, on the one hand, I'm saying it's no more than that. On the other hand, I'm saying you're going to come back to this over and over and over and over again. But it is literally, it's a touchstone. It's just a few basic ideas. It's the beginning of a journey into the art of the sword. It gives students the opportunity to hold and wield a saber correctly and establishes a solid foundation for all future exercises. Even the most advanced students will constantly return to the level one syllabus to study and make corrections. Now, on this note, these slides now include the assessments for each level. In order for yourself to be considered a level one student, you would have to have passed your level one assessment. In order for you to be considered a level one instructor, you have to be able to take a student through to passing their level one assessment. Andrew.
I might be jumping ahead slightly, but waist rotation on there.
Yeah.
So does that mean we now teach rotating waist as you do in class from the beginning, or only in poetry?
Not in a Comic-Con, because the crayons won't allow for that resolution. In a class, if you're teaching somebody whose understanding has arrived at the place where they need to introduce the waist rotations to synergize with the wrist rotations in key in point. If we take the basic hanging parry exercise here, there's my hanging parry and I have another one over there, right? My forearm has to be horizontal in front of my shoulders in order for the fort to have the support of my body behind it. But as I go from this side to this side, if I don't do any waist rotation, it becomes very awkward. So at this point, when you start to see that awkwardness as being the thing that holds somebody back, you have to show the waist rotating and releasing, rotating and releasing.
Not necessarily day one, but they need it before moving past day one.
Yeah. They need to have, at the very least, started to work on removing that awkwardness from the movement. They might not pass it at level one straight away, because the level one assessment, first of all, mother stance, you know what that is? That's your foundations in situ, the structure of the spine being primarily what we see, you know, from a therapeutic perspective. It's all here in this as well. The lordosis that exhibits at the lumbar spine for the majority of postmodern people is ultimately, it's a ticking time bomb. And arthritis of the spine is endemic for people over the age of 60 if they've been working, right? I mean, to be fair, we live to the age of 60, which is a good start, right? But like, let's be functional. Master Lee was kicking the crap out of me. He was 83 years old. He's knocking me down with one finger. Master Liu, he was 77 when he arrived here. He was like, boom, just throwing people around the room like they were toys, right? And now you think, close your eyes, think of the 80-year-olds in your life. It's almost a myth to us that there are people who can do that. We've become so, you know, we don't even see old people anymore. They live in a separate world to us. It's the story of Buddha all over again, isn't it? Right? But not just one prince. We're all princes and princesses now. Whoa.
For application between the exercises, do the students need to understand why they're doing these movements, or is that something that would be covered in later levels?
At this level, the first time they're going through level one, if they ask the question, you can let them know, right? But to be honest, asking questions more often than not becomes an excuse for not practicing. So you just have to kind of get Kung Fu will give them the understanding anyway. And most importantly, the same technique will have different meanings to different people with different physiologies and different psychologies. You know, every move in the form has untold interpretations, which is why you'll see in the form I try to stay away from discussing the applications. All right, in this point, in level 1, the first time around they're going through it, if they just do it like a parrot, that is actually teaching them something really important about just putting their concerns to one side and trusting us. Now,
at this point, will it be more prominent, advantageous to basically go, we can explain why at a later point?
Yeah.
Now, better be
Just do, repeat, just do, repeat, just do. That is the bitter, that is Kung Fu. If they don't get that, if they're constantly avoiding the hard work by questioning it, then you know you're dealing with a psychological impairment that's preventing them from engaging with challenging stuff. Now, in people who are gifted, this is very common. In people who are gifted, their intellect has become an excuse for getting away with being naturally gifted. The problem is that the world is full of gifted people who never got anywhere. The only difference between the ones who made it and the ones who didn't was hard work. And those who say luck, yes, every so often someone gets through on luck. But if you meet the people who actually achieved greatness because they deserved it, it was never an accident. It was always an intended path that they chose for themselves. So, you know, and this is, you're setting this up in level 1 with the way that you introduce people to it. The task you have as instructors in level 1 is to figure out if the students in front of you are just here, this is the only time you're ever going to see them, it's a Comic-Con, they're never going to remember you again, right? In that case, don't worry about it. Just put your costume on, put your face on, and just have a laugh with them. Make them go home happy. All right, that will bring them back to hopefully ask the deeper questions, which you can then go on to answer. All right. Okay, so mother stance foundations, two-handed grip and lever fulcrum. Middle finger is primary, forefinger is an alternative. The basic wields, the basic parries, you have to be able to deliver those 100 head cuts and those 100 lateral cuts, and they can be done in situ as partner exercises. So 200 cuts, 2 people facing each other, that is the level 1 assessment, right? What are we looking for? If they're doing a head cut, and every time they cut, it's coming down to here, that's a fail, right? If they have to do 100 cuts, and out of that 100 cuts, more than 5 are inaccurate, that's a fail. Yeah, and because you can't trust them to go forwards with their level 1 in place against somebody in even a step cut exercise. If they're constantly slicing instead of chopping, then they're just going to split somebody's face open in front of you, and that's the end of your class. Right? So you can't have that. That's not an option. So, and the lateral cuts, for example, the big thing about the lateral cuts you're going to notice is that when people are doing the lateral cuts, they're supposed to be at the height of the throat. And you're going to notice this. They're going to start drifting into lower and lower angles. And that's fine. It's nice that they're enthusiastic and they're attempting to do the assessment, but those are not lateral cuts. Lateral cuts are at shoulder height. And they have to, again, you're going to see a little bit of waist coming in with the wield and a release on the cut. They have to be correct. And ideally, you're not even going to do that level 1 assessment as an individual. You're just going to pair people up. Say, you, 100 head cuts, you, 100 lateral cuts, go. After 100, change. Just watch them from far away. If they do it, they don't even need to know they're being assessed. But if you see them stop after 30 cuts to have a chat, that's a fail. They have to do the 100 non-stop. It doesn't matter how long it takes them. It could be 100 Vienna Viola and the team that you used to train with about 4 or 5 years ago. They were 8, 9 years old at the time. They would bang out 200 cuts in less than 3 minutes. Right? Less than 3 minutes. And I will literally set that exercise and turn around 10 minutes later and people are still talking. Right? It's like, just do it. Get it out of the way. Boom, done. Right, level 1. Instructor's advice. Andrew.
So on those 100 cut spots, they can't pass it any of the customers that will take, if any
Yep.
And they pass some of the cuts just, aren't very good, but still don't get to the set.
Yes, it's level 1. You want them to pass. What my philosophy is in general is as follows. If I can find no reason to fail someone, I pass them. Right? I'm not looking for certain things to be perfect. What I'm looking for are things that I can't allow them to move forwards with. And if I see it's a bit sloppy, but it's safe, the key ingredient I'm looking for is mindfulness. Are they just wanging that saber around, or are they thinking about what they're doing and attempting to execute it? If they're thinking and they're trying and they're going to make a few mistakes, that's absolutely fine. They're not going to improve unless they make those mistakes. Right? They're not going to get better unless they carry on through those mistakes. So don't put them down for them. Just pass it, let it go.
Sorry, from a boring health and safety perspective, what happens if you catch someone on their level 1 and then there's like a degradation in their techniques or their mindfulness?
They go back to being beginners. If they pass their level 1 on Friday the 3rd, they come back on Friday the 10th and they can't do those 100 head cuts for whatever reason. Yeah, they slept funny, they strained themselves. Then as far as you're concerned, for that day, they are not level 1 pass assessed students. They are beginners again. They're going backwards as well as forwards. And this is really important because I think in the modern age, with the sort of emphasis on qualification and everything, and I think people need to be a lot more honest about the process, and you're teaching them on I would say a spiritual level by getting them to understand there's nothing wrong with getting it wrong. There's nothing wrong with going backwards to recover something before you go forwards. And it just takes a lot of the nonsense that people sort of build up around themselves and just dissolves it. You're just like, what? Who cares? Backwards, forwards, it's all forwards.
But how many weeks typically would you say you would expect them to pass there? In 1 hour a week, say, how many weeks?
This level 1, if you're dealing with people who are physically literate already, they should be able to do it after an hour's training. Yeah, if they're fit, yeah, with good muscle, yeah, good willpower, they're paying attention. The actual content at level 1, you can teach it in 20 minutes. Right, 20 minutes teaching, 40 minutes practice, pass level 1 after an hour. If you're dealing with children with perhaps autism or dyspraxia, if you're dealing with adults with dyspraxia, that level 1 could be 6 months' work, an hour a week. This is one of the things that singularly, the British fencing really struggled with our approach to teaching because they insist on timetabled classes with class lesson plans set up 6 months in advance. And maybe out of a group of 30 children, 5 of them will fit the model that you're insisting on. But what we are doing, remember when I said we invite and welcome everybody. That means we have to have a method for pedagogy that is mutable and adaptable to each of the individuals that comes in. And that's why we don't have timetables and schedules for progression. You have to, as an instructor, and I'll come to this in a moment, you have to, as an instructor, be sensitive and connected, aware, mindful of your students' place, where they are, what they're struggling with. And it does mean that we've had to separate the classes out. We now have foundation classes, and you get advanced students coming to foundation classes. You get some people like Tuesday, Wednesday nights just form. Yeah, for example, I've discovered that people who really struggle with images and internal monologues, for example, the form is designed to teach every last peasant in your village how to fight before the snow melts. It doesn't matter if you've got a special need or not. You have to join that line, stand with your spear and not break. The form teaches everybody, no matter their idiosyncrasies. It is thousands of years of refinement. It's not like we haven't had autistics and ADD and ADHD and OCD. It's not like these haven't historically been part of the human. So what the form actually does is it takes the individual's needs out of the equation. It says, just do this. If you have a neurology, this will teach you how to move, right? Okay. A repeatable single lesson that functions either as a trial class or a launch session for delivery in environments where the participants will only engage in the class on a very casual basis. That is all that level 1 is, right? As such, it's ideal for open days, holiday camps, theme parks, other installations where participants are transient. The content and vocabulary is limited to a few essential cutting and parrying techniques and excludes all footwork. With minimum barriers to engagement, the class aims to bring participants to the point where they can engage in their first blade-on-blade partner exercises within an hour or two of training. And that is, again, assuming that they're capable of doing that. Questions? Moving on.
For me to say gaps, what a student doesn't ask why they're doing harming to essentially get you to
Just do it. Just, Gareth, if somebody's not asking any questions, find a seat, sit down.
She's off.
Yes, right. If someone's not asking any questions, that probably means they're listening very carefully and are cracking on with it. Don't worry about what they're saying. Worry about what they're doing. If they're doing it right, let them carry on. If they're not doing it right, engage with them.
Is there another element in there to do with one's resolve to not give up, to continue to improve despite the challenge?
It depends on the context of the class. In a Comic-Con class, if you see that they've decided that they really can't be asked, guess what? In 15 minutes, you're never going to see them again. Just let them go through the class. If they put the saber down and go by themselves, fine. If they don't, ultimately, the end of the day, and this is my opinion, having been a teacher singularly since 2004 now, is that if you teach, the only skill that you really need in order to be a teacher is to be able to inspire other people to practice. Because if they don't practice by themselves, they're never going to learn it.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Adha ghanta late, pauna ghanta, right? Okay, from here. Right, next slide. The route, right? Now, this is, at this stage, we are talking, this is the tough one, guys. This is the deal breaker for a lot of people. In level 2, is a lot of work. I'm just going to read it and we'll come out the other side. The level 2 syllabus introduces students to the essential components of correct footwork and body alignment. That is the back stance and the half empty stance, the forward stance and the weight transitions between them. Once these initial stances and transitions are understood, they are then combined into walking drills. And this is a very classical Tai Chi approach. Again, this is actually the beginning of the syllabus. Level 1 is not the beginning of the syllabus. Level 1 is just bait. It's out there to get people to enjoy themselves in that first class so that when you drop the knowledge that they are going to have to learn to walk from scratch, they don't run screaming from the class, right? You have to make it so enjoyable and such a comfortable environment for them to be in, right? But that does necessarily, comfort requires being challenged. Because if you ain't challenged, you're bored. And bored is not comfortable. Right? You have to challenge them. Don't be nice. You are not their servant. They are there for a service. You have to provide the service. Right? If they decide they don't want that service, they can leave. If they decide that they don't want that service, it doesn't mean you change the service. You're in teaching martial arts, and that requires discipline and mindfulness and respect. It's too dangerous without any of them. Right, the drills allow students to move correctly around their targets And the level 2 assessment will then require the students to demonstrate 6 sixes, 10 reps per exercise per leg. For the purposes of the assessment, you will need to do all of the exercises entirely on one leg. A couple of wobbles are acceptable, but a constant wobble through the entire exercises is not. And then they will change to the other leg, and they will do all of the exercises on the other leg. And this is a warm-up, remember, because they're going to go straight into the other parts of the assessment. So if they need a 15-minute break after doing the 6 sixes, that is still a fail. A stamina test.
Arms optional? Sort of.
I would say depending on how far through somebody is. If somebody's revisiting level 2, for example, then yes, the second time they start doing the assessments, I would want all the 6 sixes to be done from a high guard point advanced, right? I don't mind if the first time you test somebody, you just do hands on hips and do it like that, because it is quite tricky. But again, you see the idea that we're folding people back through the syllabus over and over again. You go 1, 1, 2, back, 1, 2, 3, back, 1, 2, 3, 4, back. It constantly comes back to the beginning, because each new thing you learn will slightly change your understanding of the foundations, right? 6 steps to walking. They have to be able to demonstrate the 6 steps to walking in clear, discrete components. And then the last one is the step cut exercise, which you're going to check their posture, their measure, their volume, and their line. And to be honest, with people who you folding them back through 2 or 3 times through the process, you can actually check the quality of their 6 sixes and their 6 steps to cut, 6 steps through the step cut exercise. Because if they aren't lifting their legs and they don't have the strength to do any of this stuff, then you'll notice all of their step cut is going to be like this. It has no discipline. It doesn't have any kung fu. If they can't support themselves on one legs, they're not able to do 6 steps to walking, because 6 steps to walking is teaching them to appreciate yin and yang in each foot one by one. And if they can't hold their strength, if they haven't got the strength to hold the postures, they can't differentiate yin and yang. They're always going to be trying to be double weighted as soon as possible because it hurts.
In cases of injury or something like prosthesis, what would we be looking
You
at?
can relieve the condition which says that they have to do them all on one leg and then all on the other leg. You can let them take a break, but you don't let them stop.
No.
Right? They have to keep going through it. If they're injured, you let them stop for when they need to, whatever. I mean, if they're injured, why are they doing it? Right, is the first question. Right? If it's you're using this as a therapeutic method to help rehabilitate them following injury or illness, then they actually have to go through it. But they do so at their own pace. You now remove any conditions, you take away any pressure, and if it takes them an hour and a half in class just to get through the 6 sixes, that is a damn sight better than sitting on the couch at home eating cheesecake and the injury is settling into a stagnant place, which means that the rehabilitation will take twice as long. Right? The faster you start moving the body in the way that it was originally intended to move, the faster the body will start referencing the DNA and the reconstruction will be functional. Right? Scar tissue is a mess. It's no use to anyone. Yes.
One thing I like to say in terms of how we're explaining to students and so on, step cut does introduce things like strategy and so on.
Yes, absolutely.
All of that is level 3. Your assessment from step cut for level 2 is entirely positive measurable. And so your focus initially should be that.
Right.
Anytime you're coming back to this one, your focus should be that. So
Right.
strategy just lets you see some things that work, some things that don't.
Now, there is a version of step cut that emerges in level 4, parry counter, right? So you're going to come back to step cut in level 2 to give level 4 students a chance to refine some of the things posture, measure, volume, line, because when you put them in the parry counter exercise, you notice those things fall out. Bring them back, give them this exercise again from level 2.
But a parry counter one, I think usually focus on following there, I'll have time.
Yes, it's a different exercise.
Yeah.
So to focus on posture, measure, volume, and line, bring them back to level 2. Do step cut, right? Yeah, you got it. We're good. Right, level 2 contains many of the therapeutic methods of traditional Tai Chi Chuan, and it is ideal for recovery from illness and injury. Students with poor posture or compromised cardiovascular fitness will find the level 2 syllabus as a practical supplement to their physiotherapy or exercise routines. All right, this stuff is deep. This stuff is deep. Now, what are we talking about? It's about a 10-week course to get someone through level 2, to show them everything. If they do the homework, they'll have it in 10 weeks. It's not that hard, really. If you're dealing with people who have injuries, then it's going to take them a lot longer. But what you now have is a simple rehabilitation practice to teach people how to walk again following knee surgery, following hip surgery, following a cast being removed. You want to restore the atrophy in the muscles after somebody hasn't been able to use it for 6 weeks or 6 months or something. Well, 6 Sixes is going to do everything that they need, and it's also going to introduce that strength in the context of balance and breath as well, right? It's all in here. It requires participants to maintain regular attendance in order to develop good technique and familiarity with the culture of LED Sabre, right? There's no getting through level 2 casually. It takes a lot of time. I think, Paul, you got a group of a class of autistics through level 2, and it took 2 years.
Yeah, that's about
right. Right. So even people with learning difficulties,
a little less.
yeah.
Some.
So the process is broken down enough, and it loops background enough that it doesn't matter who you are. There is a way through, and this is an opportunity for people who may have been excluded from other forms of education to demonstrate that they are in fact intelligent. You just have to give them a pathway that allows them to develop. And as soon as they demonstrate that, then you'll find that other people have more faith in them as well, and they're giving them more opportunities, and that allows them to grow. I love this stuff. It's such a nicer way of living, right? Okay. As such, it is perfect to run in schools, fitting neatly into a single term, and can also be presented and delivered in institutions such as gyms and health clubs as a quality aerobic product, as a progressive and structured combat fitness class, also known as Sabre Burn, right? Sabre Burn is the gym product. It's going to be slowly released. No, it's not. It's going to be hitting the world like a freight train shortly. Freight train on fire, loaded with TNT. Right, at level 2, the activity is considered an exercise and physical literacy program, not just a Star Wars Comic-Con anymore, right? It's an exercise and physical literacy program. It aspires towards competitive engagement, but it is also ideally suited as a fun way to keep fit for those with no interest in combat whatsoever. Right? There's no reason you couldn't start introducing form to somebody who's got good 6 steps of walking, for example. Yes.
For students who have no interest in combat, is this where the level game would stop? Would you just skip past elements of level 3 and the other more combat-based levels?
That's their choice. If they want to learn the level 4 stuff, they can, but nothing's gonna make any sense until they get into the ring. Right? People who don't want to fight are laboring under a prejudice that assumes that we have to be violent, or that they have to become something that they're not. Right? What you have to do is sort of show them that actually competing doesn't necessarily require defaulting to the ego. It is a crucible. That's all it is. It's just a place where you go to see if your stuff comes together or comes apart. That's all it is. But because we have a culture which is just mental, people are so obsessed with performance and results and all of that kind of horseshit that essentially what they do is they truncate their own development. Right? The fear of failure stops people from even trying.
So would the challenge be there to be explain that combat isn't necessarily a trial by fire or a way to prove yourself, but in essence to make your material stuck?
Right?
Let me write that down.
The impression I had with it was technology in level 3 is needed to properly understand level 4, and a little bit of sparring there is needed to prove that you're safe to some stuff.
Right?
But you don't need to, train the more.
No, not at all. Now, earlier on the question, there was another question.
I have a slanted perspective on it, only because, some of the kids that I work with, although I don't disagree with anything you said about sort of the ego issue, if somebody has, in this one instance, this person has a self-esteem issue, and it's incredibly challenging for her to do combat. As soon as she realises that it's combat, she literally falls to pieces. Whereas, I think we've all experienced, doing a combat, being a bit stiff, awkward, and then you kind of get the demonstration vibe, and you start flowing, and then you're fighting better. And with her form, she's got a love for dance, so that movement, she really enjoys that movement. And I don't feel any need to plug her back into the fighting thing at all. Even one step in the cut, sometimes she'll do it for a bit, the switch will flip, and she'll be incapable, and I'll move her out of it straight away. The form, she's taking an absolute love.
So if I just
passion, so she's getting the mindfulness stuff, and then the cuts that you're delivering in that anyway, you can then take into what is it?
Right.
Don't think it has to be approached.
No. I'm going to come to this in a second, right? As an right. The thing to remember is that there's no linear requirement to go through it in that way. If somebody gets their level 2 assessment and they want to start learning the level 4 stuff, that's fine. If they want to learn the form before they step in the ring for the first time, that's fine. But they won't be able to pass their level 3 assessment, right? Which means I am not going to allow them to wear a crest and represent the academy in tournament, which means that they are never going to make the display team because they are never going to be safe, right? If somebody's going to basically lose their cool in step cut, you put them in costume and put them on stage and turn the spotlight on, they are going to possibly have a traumatic episode that will last 20 years, right?
For me, the question is more based on someone who wouldn't want to necessarily go up to a common team status, or who does it as a form of either exercise and or enlightenment.
They can do that, but again, they can go through as much of the syllabus as they like from any chapter that you feel they're ready to study. But in terms of their progression through the academy, they are a level 2 assessed student, that's it, right? If they haven't passed their level 3, they will never be a level 4 student, right? There is no level 4 without the understanding of how it works in combat. And you have to sell that to them, not as a contest against, it's there underneath, above the sink, and it's been there since 2013. It says, mastery of others is strength. Mastery of oneself is true power, right? That is what you're trying to say to them. Look, that person, that opponent that you're facing in the ring is the best opportunity you're going to have to understand yourself, to see how you react under those circumstances, right? And honest to God, I really do believe that we have an opportunity to bring a generation that starts as young as the age of 8, right? And they're going to grow into young adults with these philosophical concepts being integrated into their personalities, right? And that, I think, is the biggest. We can't change the trajectory of the human race unless we can introduce some kind of a revolution in the way that we think about each other. Right, as long as we're still a collection of individuals, we're not going to behave collectively any more intelligently than yeast.
I
Right?
do like bread, so that's
You do know that yeast in a petri dish will eat all the sugar and starve itself to death, right?
To say 3 days actually. The clues in the name, I would also say, we've got a combat academy. The combat's a term. Maybe you didn't do your research, but the other thing is what you've always said about getting in the ring is don't die. So you can approach it just as a go in there and don't get hit. You don't. It doesn't have to be an expression of violence.
Yeah.
You're going to hit someone anyway.
I think in order to pass it as an assessment, you have to be doing some hits so you know that you get to say.
Let's, on this note, move to slide 3. The arena, right? It's all here. Right.
There's a standard
Just saying on to that, we did have a student that's got to sparring, decided they didn't like it, and they.
it's just from my perspective, as someone who has, who is on the autism spectrum, I know a lot of people who are also very autistic who cannot handle the sensitivity of a combat environment, and it will take them potentially a decade to get to that point where it's not.
I'm just going to put this out there. Autistics, many of the autistics that I have met and known in my life are biologically better equipped for combat than any non-autistic ever will be. The problem isn't their ability. The problem is the perception of self that they have been burdened with by people who don't understand them, right? Autistics thrive in situations where advanced sort of precognition isn't an option.
Oh no, absolutely, and I agree with that. I'm thinking of it at a much more like simpler level. As someone who suffers with like hypersensitivity to either light or sound, that situation can be not only triggering, it can become dangerous. So it's
Yes. Your job is to help them default to intelligently programmed reflexes instead of losing their shit. That's what combat is about. Watch, right? A level 3 student is permitted to begin exploring competitive sparring using the techniques they have established in levels 1 and 2. There is no additional technical material at level 3 except the introduction of the concept of initiative and the tournament rules that competitors must abide by. No new content. Level 3 is designed to assess a student's capacity to remain mindful under the pressures of open sparring and to ensure that they are physically prepared for competition. There's no judgment on their victory or failure or whatever. It's purely, you simply say, are you scared that you're going to lose your sense of self when you do this? And then, yeah, right. In order to pass this, you don't have to win. You don't even have to keep up. You only have to keep your stuff together. A successful completion of level 3 is not based on victory or defeat. A level 3 assessment consists of the LSOT rules, operating under these conditions without fouling and assisting in refereeing. Principles, including initiative, all the principles we've gone over previously. Intent, show a clear competitive mindset applied using the techniques of levels 1 and 2.
Expand on that. I just want to assess and clear competitive mindset.
There has to be an intent to be successful there. All right. So what we're talking about is if it shuts somebody down, and the way that if I step into the ring with you and I'm determined not to let you hit me, that is competitive intent, right? If I step into the ring and I'm determined to beat you, that is competitive intent. If I step into the ring and I don't know what I'm doing there, then you're not actually in the ring. You're a person out of time. Yeah, Andrew?
Well, actually, a couple of things. Demonstration of form is part of the level 3. But that's a new bit of technical content that it's not covered in the other two.
No, because there's no. You should have already started to introduce aspect of form.
Yes, but this is the first time you mentioned.
I know. This actually only came in about a month ago, right? So that's fairly
the
new.
other thing is, if you've got a student who has absolutely zero interest in ever doing anything for this, and they want to move on to level 4 stuff, and they are, willing to learn how fighting works and so on, do you really need to drill in the LSO2 rules? Because if they do free-sparring and demonstrate it's fairly safe, then they're fine.
There's no difference between LSOT rules and free sparring. They're very simple. I mean, the counting of the points, the hit points and the hit locations is a referee's problem. From the fighter's perspective, if you're fighting under the LSOT rules with arcs of cut and the rest of it, let's
But that has assisting in refereeing as part of the assessment.
yeah, you need to be able to do it.
Which means that in order to end up on a display team, you have to know your scoring, refereeing and self-performance.
Yeah.
And go over the score.
Yes. Yeah. You need to know it.
Yeah.
Even if you choose not to join a team, you should be choosing not to join a team, even though you could if you wanted to. If you can't join a team because you're not good enough, or you haven't done the work rather, then it's a fail.
Do they have to be, I mean, teaching how to do refereeing or how to do scoring takes like 5 minutes. It's just, here's what the scoring system is. I can see why we want them to be willing to assist in refereeing and so on about that. You have to be any good at it.
I would say that being good at refereeing is something that people can only... We have Nick Payne here, right? Let me just quickly finish for the mic because, right?
So, as you have now, I'm an Olympic referee in fencing, but having done.
It's a skill. It takes as long to be a good referee as it takes to be a good fighter. Yeah.
So I'd say in LED, it's even more difficult because you don't have the visual physicality when a hit is made or not, and you're relying on your assistant referees, and you can't look at two people at the same time. So that
it's tough. It's hard. What we're looking for is not that somebody is successfully refereeing, but that they've overcome their reticence and are prepared to do something that they find awkward for the sake of the team.
That makes sense, yeah.
Right?
When you're the same in fencing, if you are unsure of yourself when you deliver your final verdict, you can argue back.
You just have to have the confidence to adjudicate, knowing full well that you may have made a mistake, but that's not the point. One, it's for the referees to make a decision. I know what I saw, I might be wrong, but I'm going to call it like this. And it's also for the fighters who know that they've been called badly against. They have to have the humility to accept that they've entered into an environment which is dictated by the referee. And if the referee made a mistake, that's just too bad. That is something that they have to learn. And again, for example, if anybody takes their mask off and throws it, they go home. Anybody takes their mask off and throws it in a hissy fit after they lose a match or something, that's a black card. Get your stuff, pack your bag, go home. All right? That's what we're talking about. That's what we're teaching. Massive difference from the sporting sort of culture that parallels us.
And also, in terms of refereeing, this is the hardest refereeing you'll ever be able to do for any sport that I've.
Yeah, it's not easy.
The ability to track, arc and cut, hit points landed, count the hits against each person, keep track of that, and keep it safe and everything else.
It's a nightmare, right? But and this is why everybody has to have a go, because the only way you're going to be a good competitor is if you have respect for the adjudicators, and the only way you'll have that is if you try to do it and you go, nah, man, that is hard work. That is seriously hard. Respect to you. If you think I didn't hit, I'll let it go.
If you don't have a headache after wrestling, you are wrestling.
You're right. It's hard. It's hard.
Except for that bit.
Right. Now, I'll be honest. I think there is a technical solution which is going to be a multi-screen slow-mo replay set up with an operator that can quickly just do it. Right. Having to do it on a mobile phone like this, it takes too long. We need a technical solution that will make refereeing a lot easier. But having said that, we also need a grassroots, just a torch with a tube, 4 people, let's go, right?
Honestly, that's super expensive. It's like,
I know. I know.
When we were doing it on points, what was slowing it down was everyone standing around deciding if they were going to use slow mo. But it was literally just, okay, stop, check the slow mo, done, that.
I know. That's my way of doing it. My way is that whilst the referee calls halt, immediately the operator has rewound it and the sub-refs are watching it. Referee doesn't even need to watch it. The sub-refs should be able to make that decision while the referee controls the arena. The sub-ref comes back to the ref and says, this and this happened. Then the referee will make a final decision on that. Boom, gone. There's a process, right? But we're not going to get into that here. We're going to go through the slides.
Super quick one, I'm assuming like with the other levels, if we see a degradation in either composure, content understanding, or anything like that, it's not a permanent, but pull back into the level 2, don't allow combat, wait.
That's it, that's it. Look, if somebody fails their level 3, they don't necessarily need to go back. They need to carry on trying to fight at level 3 until they finally break the ice and they achieve this one, fitness and composure. Remain calm throughout 5 times 2-minute rounds. That's non-stop, right? So maybe with in between the rounds, there's a 30-second stop here or there whilst the referees reset and stuff. That's about a 10-15 minute. That's 10-15 minutes of game time. Now, if they've done their level 2 properly, they can do their 6-6s, they're doing their step cut well, then they should essentially, the question you asked at the beginning about whether or not, you know, we make them do it or this or that. And the answer is, look, you don't have to do anything except not lose your cool. That's all.
If we have 6 months of like steady progressive behaviour and like there's an episode that happens, what would be the appropriate management towards it is basically what I'm trying to.
Depends on the context very much, but if somebody has a bit of an epi, I choose, if I can, to ignore it. Right? Because if you make too much out of something, it becomes an event in their timeline, which is another source of trauma.
So it could be a thing where you say, look, how are you in like that high level sparring today?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there are times when it looks like I'm ignoring something or didn't hear it. Sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. Right? You have to almost pretend to like if a kid's throwing a tantrum because they didn't get what they want, sometimes just pretend they're not there. And eventually they're just like, oh, I'm not going to get what I want. Oh, okay, maybe I'll use the thing that I already have. Right? And it's the same thing. If you give people, you know, if you put the spotlight on them, and especially if they're already feeling very self-conscious, you don't want to cement that as a traumatic episode.
It's just more how a brain's on. Normally I'll ask
Breathe, relax. Questions?
There are 2 questions.
Let's go to the board first. Hold that.
Let me just get, I'm going to jump to Simon because it's more relevant to what you just said.
Yep.
He's got 5 times 2. Is that against different from each round?
No, it doesn't have to be. Could be this. It could actually just be they might not even know they're being assessed for level 3. It might just be. It might just be that they're doing 5 rounds of combat in training with one person, and you're quietly watching from the other side of the room, and all you're trying to look for is, are they cheating? Are they fouling? Are they arguing? Or are they here, now, in the ring, doing their best? And that's essentially, if that's the case, then that's a pass, even if they get their ass kicked.
And
yeah.
This actually leads into a question Gareth has asked. Given that level 3 is where a lot of bravado may come out in some individuals, for example, acting unnecessarily aggressive or intimidating, what boundaries would you set, or what could be done or said preemptively?
Remain calm is the pass. Anybody who basically brings the wrong wolf to the ring, again, unnecessary aggression or hostility is a red, if not black card offense. And if you foul by being abusive or less than kind to your opponent, then that is exactly why we have to do combat. I come from a culture, and I'm not the only one. I met many people in my life from different cultures who share the same thing, where we are taught that even the animals that we eat for food have to be killed with mercy. Right? You're not allowed to become a monster under any circumstances, ever. That's all we have to do whilst we're on this earth. Right? If we did that, then maybe we'd be off this earth by now. Yes.
Yeah, basically, two different ones are mashed together.
Be quick, because Paul's going to forget.
So control, shouldn't that sort of be like, you can be calm and collect and so on, but still there's something in your technique.
No, that's a fail, isn't it?
No.
Whether on an emotional level or on a technical level, if somebody is putting their opponent into a place where there's a threat genuinely to their safety.
It is recognizing that can happen even if, they're perfectly nice and friendly, there just isn't part of that.
Yeah, if they don't have that control, that's a fail.
But also, there's a distinction between, like there's a certain point at which you say, okay, you are now safe to do sparring, that comes at the, after the end of level 2 or the end of level 3, because you have to do sparring.
No. If you pass your level 2 assessment, you are now qualified to study in the arena. You can be engaged in competitive play for the purposes of developing that skill set. But you need to pass your level 3 in order to enter a competition.
That is fine. It's the going in sparring, because there's people who can do all the technical stuff at level 2, but are still ones that I would want them to have a lot more practice before I want them actually sparring.
Yeah, they are level 2 students awaiting to pass their level 3 assessment. Yeah, well, no, that control is in level 2 already. You've got your posture, measure, volume, and line, right?
A lot of that, quite often you find that disappears the moment there's an intent.
Right, so the bridge, that's the bridge. So what you're talking about is somebody who shows control at the end of level 2 in step cut, but doesn't have control in a competitive sparring environment. So they've passed their level 2 assessment, and they are pending passing their level 3 assessment. They're never going to pass their level 3 until they overcome the dissonance that is introduced with an opponent.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of level 3. That's why there really isn't any additional content. They know everything that they need to pass the level 3 by this point, because they passed their level 2.
On what sort of intensity sparring people do.
Yeah. It needs to get to the point where its intent is competitive, and it needs to get to that point without becoming unsafe.
I know previously you were having assessments on whether or not people start sparring without a set.
Yeah, this is now much clearer.
Okay.
Right, it's now much clearer.
One is about access to fights, which is presumably it requires a financial investment in kit. They're not going to do it without gloves and masks.
Right, so things.
Two is certainly as a sort of satellite teacher, I'm not too, I don't have the setup on Friday night. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I do.
Giving access to students that, as teachers, we teach somewhere else, and we want them to then be involved. So it's a wider point about as the academy grows, certain ages, and abilities and needs, how they access level 3. Yeah, they can't just rock up on a Friday night necessarily.
So what was the first part?
The first part, it's all really one thing.
All right, in terms of equipment, right?
Students access to practice.
So, in terms of equipment, we can lend out sabres to people. We can no longer lend out gloves or masks, right? Shared equipment is massively being rewritten as a consequence of COVID. And I don't realistically think the world is ever going to be the same again. I think masks are a standard thing globally forever. And I think the policy of not sharing equipment is essentially going, because we're not going to have a massive reduction, well, we might have a massive reduction in population that reduces the density such that pandemics are no longer an issue. But I don't think that's going to happen. There's 8 billion people on planet Earth, and pandemics are a reality and will continue to emerge every couple of years. That's just how it goes. So equipment sharing, they are going to, because of that, have to buy their own masks and gloves. Masks are not that expensive. 150 quid is the same as you pay for a decent pair of football boots, right?
You can still buy a club mask at 70 or.
Yes, you can buy, you can club masks are absolutely fine. They don't have the washable, detachable bib and blah, 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 but it's fine. A pair of gloves, 20 quid is enough. So you're looking at a total outlay per person of about £200. That is not bad. That's not bad for starting. Yeah, compared to fencing, compared to snooker, you need your own snooker cue. You could easily spend £100 there, you know.
And still unaccessible to some students, so what would be the way to support that? Because I know, sorry, from my background, that was not even feasibly possible.
On the subject of arranging a network whereby people have access to environments where they can go and study the level 3, this is a headache. There's no way around it. What we need is, first of all, we have Friday nights at the Salle in Leon Paul, right? And we can only at the moment invite people to come and train at Leon Paul for their assessments at level 3. Until your class is large enough and stable enough for you to create that environment yourself, independently, you're going to have to be dependent on a network. So until we've got more instructors with their own clubs around the country, we are going to struggle with that. And the only option I would say is that you'll have to call in specialist instructors or have special sessions which are large enough, where you have the assistance you need to have several supervised fighting spaces. But I mean, it's a long-term thing, yeah.
One is in terms of the aggression and all the stuff we were just talking about there. Essentially, you can't lose your shit without separating from all of the principles. You can't get up on someone unless you raise your sternum. It's very difficult. Unless
Yeah,
you're really
yeah.
psycho.
Yep.
Usually it's going to be this first. There's going to be a physical question, leaving aside an emotional, spiritual.
They're all one.
You're talking to people in a therapeutic or at least more advanced teaching manner. You can literally just address at that point when you came up. That's when there was this is the physical, this is the difference, yeah? But this is where that's what we're looking at, and
that's it.
This is the section,
that's it.
This is the level 2 point.
Right, it's
and
very.
The third point I have is, can we get a movement break / just break for those people that want to break?
All right, let me.
Can I get to the end of these slots?
Let's get to the end of.
There's 52 slides, we're on 10.
No, most of the later ones are rubbish, right? Most of the right. Let me get through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? The later ones, right? Okay.
I just want to add to the equipment thing. This is how I deal with that actually. When I can see someone's ready to go beyond one step, one part, I start informing them. You might want to get some gloves so you can move into one step, one part, and it gets a bit faster. And then, oh, okay, where do I get those?
Gradually, yeah.
Cheap elbow pads, wicked, 40 quid max. Then I say to them, once you're ready for the arena, you can move in the mask. And then I let them know how much it is, 70 odd or 100
Yeah.
if you want to get something really special. And that gives them a chance to save up. They're not ready for the arena.
Well, the other thing is this, we when somebody passes their level 2 and they're then qualified to step into the arena and start training there, that's the point at which we offer them a 25% discount on the kit that we sell from the foundry. And the reason that commercial kind of infrastructure is there is actually to support the message that's coming through the actual syllabus itself. Is we're saying that before this, if you want it, it's just vanity. After this, you need it. So we'll give it at a discount. Quick.
Work out quickly when implementing that advice, whether or not they want to do forms and stuff. Because that is much heavier here.
I'm gonna.
Why keep stuff first?
Yeah. Right. So quickly, level 3 requires that participants move beyond simple exercise and into a competitive sporting activity. Now, in my mind, and I am not a team player really. I like being on my own. I'm the stealth dude at the back always, not at the front line. I find sporting to be a very toxic environment. But I find I love fighting, so there's not much you can do. Just go in there and smile as you cut them up, yeah? Masks and gloves are mandatory protective equipment, and participants will need to register for member-to-member insurance cover. Very important. All of our instructors are insured as commercial instructors, which means that they are allowed to teach people without insurance at odd events here and there and whatever and what have you. But really, by the time somebody's putting a mask on, they need their own individual member-to-member insurance, of which everybody in this room has already had it arranged by myself. If you have your own clubs, you will need to get up to speed with that. I don't think BF will cover properly against this. I don't know what BF is doing with LED Sabre at the moment. They're all over the place. I know that they started calling it Lightsaber because they've taken money from Ludo Sport, but I also know that Ludo Sport will never go any further with BF until they decide to wear masks, which they're never going to do. So it's an absolute, I don't understand. BF are basically off the page at the moment. British fencing. There are a variety of games and competitive formats that can be introduced, ranging from the orthodox sports models, such as you can just fence with lightsabers if you like, to those employed by traditional fencing, and of course the exciting Silver Sabres LSOT tournament formats. Level 3 is specifically concerned with basic sparring and tournament fighting, and academies and clubs with level 3 instructors should be capable of holding their own internal competitive events. All level 3 instructors are required to be able to referee a tournament match. So in essence, in answer to Paul's question, which is how do we provide an environment excuse me, where people can study this if you don't have that facility on site, is you as an individual either bring them to us where we have that facility, or it is the instructor's responsibility to get to the point where they can create that environment on site for themselves. Right, moving on. Level 4, the geometry. A level 4 student should be familiar and comfortable with the basics and is now moving beyond sporting activity. From this point forwards, they have to connect to the martial arts foundations and applications of the syllabus. Students are introduced to an additional range of cuts, parries, and wielding techniques that allow fighters to flow seamlessly from one action to the next. This is achieved using the large circle cutting form of the 8 spheres geometry of combat. The level 4 assessment will require students to demonstrate the 8 points of cutting, the octagon of defense, outside, inside, orbital and figure 8 wields, hemisphering, advanced footwork, including the 9 palace stepping, slip stepping, and advanced stepping, and solo form sections 1, 2, and 3. They have to be able to show by themselves the first 3 sections of the form in order to pass their level 4, on top of all the specific techniques that I've just mentioned. All study circulates back into level 3 to give fighters a much larger vocabulary for engagement and a broader understanding of strategies and tactics. Andrew?
Would you be teaching these concurrently? Or would you be teaching 3 and 4 concurrently?
Yes, so you start to see that even though the levels are very precisely defined as to what content is in each level, actually in a class, you are probably for each individual student going to be drawing from 2, 3, maybe even 4 levels worth of syllabus to help them to isolate and work on whatever it is they're dealing with. For example, hemisphering and some of the advanced footworks as well, they really make sense once you're in the ring. We need to give them that experience in the ring as soon as possible after level 2, because a lot of people are turning up because they want to spar. So we give them their level 3 as soon as possible. I would prefer that they didn't fight until after level 4, but you'll see why that's not possible in a moment. instructor's advice. This level of training diverges from intensive weekend courses and requires each candidate to start training and practicing over extended periods of time. Classes become ongoing and assessments are made during continuous training over several months. If we insisted on level 4 prior to combat, it would probably mean an individual would be in class for 18 to 24 months before they were allowed to fight the first time. And I do not believe that the meme-driven internet generations have that level of patience or self-belief. They just don't. Instagram has wrecked the default level of self-confidence that people are born with. It just doesn't exist. Everybody's so busy comparing the best of their favorite celebrity with their own behind the scenes reels, right? That everybody thinks that, and then you get the reverse. So you get people who, in order to try and hide that inadequacy, build up this incredibly fragile ego around what they're doing. And the solution to it, in all cases, is for them to understand continuous training over several months. It's like, wait a second, guys. Look, this has taken about 3,000 to 4,000 years, right? Tao Te Ching was written in about 800 BC or something, and it's taken generations of people who've lived and died to pass this on intact. It's taken me decades to the point where I can get to actually trying to explain it using words and write it down. And you're going to quit because you didn't get it in 25 seconds. Right? It is a disease. It is an absolute egomania to think that you're going to pick up the entirety of human physical culture in the space of 4 weeks or something. Yes?
Speaking as a prior study student who didn't understand practice, is there anything other than just practice you can say or do?
No.
Okay.
I mean, you've got corrections.
Said it in the level first.
Is there anything other than telling them to repeat it that you can do? No. You can hit them. You can offer them dumplings. But ultimately, any carrot or stick is still applied to the repetition, right? And what you're gonna notice, what you will notice, right, in class, this is really important, because at this point in level 4, this is now a martial art, and now you will notice a very clear difference between the students who will continue to repeat the exercise until they're told not to, and those who will do the 20 reps and sit down and get their phone out and say, I did it. And you know from that moment, right, that person, all I need to do is guide them, they're going to go through. This person, we have to actually rebuild certain protocols in their mind as to how they go about living their lives. And you're not teaching them technique, you're now life coaching these people. You're now a mentor, you're not an instructor. It's a completely different thing. And they may be in that situation because of special needs. They may be in that situation because of trauma and abuse. They may be in that situation because they just, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not your job to judge. It's just your job to give them the tools to help to improve themselves, right? Okay. Success requires each individual's physiology to start adapting to the art of the sword in the same way as any athlete's body adapts to their chosen sport. This is only achievable through a commitment to training and repetition of correct technique. A candidate that has full academic understanding will find that knowledge insufficient if they have not invested in the physical practice of the techniques. After the basic exercise and physical literacy programs of levels 1 and 2 and the competitive sport of level 3, instructors teaching at level 4 are expected to be able to deliver content in the manner of a traditional martial art. Candidates will typically spend at least a year or two studying level 4 before they are able to demonstrate correct techniques and fluency. All right? You can get a black belt in less time than it takes for people to pass their level 4. And a case in point, hands up everybody in this room who's been training more than a year, more than 2 years, more than 3 years, more than 4 years, more than 5 years, more than 6 years. Hands up everybody who's passed their level 4. Anybody in the room, you all know your 8 points of cut, right? You all know your octagon defense, right? You all know your outside, inside orbital and figure 8s, right? You all know how to hemisphere, right? Everybody here can do the 9 palace?
You've never shown me.
There's a reason for that. It's because you haven't got the root for it yet. Slipped steps, advancing steps. Can we combine all 4 of those wieldings in any hemisphere using whichever step we want? No, we can't. If I ask you, if I throw it, you have to, no. I have to think. No, I have to think about it. It's hard, right? And solo sections 1 to 3, right? This part here, where this actually forms a grid, and you have to be able to hit a tick in every box on that grid. And nobody in this room so far has finished the level 4. No one, right? And you're 5 years into training, 6 years into training. So that's just, there's a couple of folks who are close. Couple of folks who are close, but a couple of people have specific issues with certain aspects of this, which are going to take months more to work through. But that doesn't mean we're not working on level 5 just because we haven't got a realistic chance of passing level 4 in the next 6 months or something, right? It's fine. It's a long-term thing. That's why we have to break this thing that it's an achievement. It is a block. Level 4 is a massive block in the syllabus. Level 2 was a massive block in the syllabus. Just got to support people through them.
But you would also say, even with regards to levels 1 to 3, just because you might have passed level 3, it doesn't mean you're not always working on this. Even if we pass level 4, we're always going to be working.
Totally. So if I take you back to the slide earlier, I literally said, a student who passes a level of assessment never leaves the content behind. They just open and unlock access to more sophisticated understanding and techniques. But what you'll discover is when you're trying to reach for those difficult things that are complicated, like, for example, using a hemisphering with a figure 8 wield and 9 palace stepping, that's a job, right? You have to hemisphere using only figure 8 wields, 9 palace stepping. Right? But the point is here, I don't need to tell you how to lace these together. You already by this point understand that the fluency requires that you can literally just roll a dice. And in fact, the level 4 assessment is a deck of cards. It's a deck of cards with 52 cards, and we shuffle the cards and we just deal 1 card at a time. And whatever that card says the move is, you've got to do that move. And that grid of all of those movements tied with the specific wields, that's what each of those cards is. And now you'll have to do 1 deck of cards for your 9 palace, 1 deck of cards for your slipped, and 1 deck of cards for your advancing step, for a total of 156 cards dealt.
This is why my partner is convinced we're all training to become Tibetan monks.
Yes.
Maybe all Tibetan monks are training to be joining us. Right? Okay.
So that's the black belt grading, isn't it?
It is.
Is 9 palace there covering all cross stepping you do?
Yes.
Because I always thought of it specifically only about one specific exercise and don't call it 9 palace.
No. 9 palace stepping is, look.
It's fine if it's just.
No. It's I'm just going to quickly just tangent for a second. Is absolutely beautiful. There are so many levels of things that you need to have right in your principles and your foundations before 9 palace stepping really becomes available to you as a functional method. And you know what we talk about in level 2 with the step cut, and even at level 3, we don't want to see people stepping across themselves unless they're doing it correctly in the 9 palace manner. And if somebody's cross-stepping in front of themselves in their level 3 assessment, that's actually a fail. If their thighs clash, right, that is actually uprooting you. It's destabilizing yourself. When you do the 9 palace method, it's only available if the head is up, the bum is down, the breath is correct, and the weight is correct in the feet. And there's a lot of room in between the feet, even though you're cross-stepping in front and behind. All right, and it's evident when somebody's doing it correctly because the altitude of the hips doesn't change, and you don't get that Beyonce sort of that business going in, and you see somebody moving like they're floating like a hovercraft around you, but they're cross-stepping, which should disrupt their footwork. However, there are people who are now cross-stepping quite well, and they're doing it with the correct technique. And if they're doing it with the correct technique, because it's in the form, right? We teach them in the form, we teach them 9 palace. If they're now doing that in combat, that's absolutely fine. There's no problem with cross-stepping if it's done correctly. It's if you do it wrong. Yeah, if you're reaching too far like this is no use to you. Cross steps are small. Right? So there's a way to do it that's correct, and there's a way to do it that's not correct. If you're doing it correctly, all power to you. Where am I? We're done with the slide, right? Question.
Simon would like to ask, can level 1 instructors teach level 1, or do you need to be a higher level?
No, a level 1 instructor is qualified to teach level 1. That's the definition. They can take a student all the way through to completing their level 1 assessments. Yeah? And the same, an instructor level shows that you can take somebody to that assessment level, and a student level means that they've passed that level of assessment. So a level 3 instructor can teach all the way through to people, even teaching them how to be assistant referees and stuff. A level 3 student is somebody who's passed their level 3 assessment, right? And
never teach beyond your level.
no, I mean, you might, for example, if you know the whole form, but you're only a level 2 instructor, you might teach the whole form, but you're not going to be able to take someone through the level 3 assessment, right?
I mean, everyone here can teach all those stuff.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, look, do not be under any delusion as to how amazing this group in general is when it comes to, I mean, when I was your age, the only people who had any interest, and even today, if anybody who went to the Tai Chi class will notice that the youngest people in that room are still me and Awas. And it's been that way. It's been that way since we turned up when Awas was 14 and I was 21. I'm tangenting. I'm going to go back. It's all right. It's all right. The world is large. I let lots of it in, right? Okay. The stage. All right. 6 and 7 are quite quick, so this is the one where I want you to focus. Level 5. So fight performance is where a student takes all that they have learned through competition and sparring and begins to evolve into an artist capable of entertaining an audience. Mastery of technique is absolutely essential, and performers are required to apply a state of mind which no longer sees their opponent as an enemy, but rather sees them as a partner, working together to create a spontaneous fight display. So I can't stress to what extent I find that people who fail at level 5 are also the people who don't want to compete at level 3. It's like the reason you fail at level 5 is because you're afraid to lose. And the reason you're afraid to lose is because you don't get in the ring. You realize that losing is learning. Thank you. Can I have my teeth back now? All right, I just can't get over it. And this really winds me up. Really winds me up, because the most powerful people I've ever met in my life were always also the most humble. Every single time. Uncle Pat was a killer. And he used to turn up with shoes for me. These look like these might fit fast. Try them on. Like, what, for me? Where'd you get them? Shh. Try them on. Right? So did you, right? This is important. You need to understand that at level 5, if you are still trying to prove to the world that you have the right to exist, you're in the wrong place. Yeah, that's level 3. That's level 3. And you'll note that in order to pass level 3, all you have to do is stay calm. So if you go out there trying to prove you exist and you make a mess of yourself, then you fail level 3 as well. How do you prove that you have a right to exist? It's because you can engage, you can protect your loved ones, you can do what you need to, and you can still be yourself. You're not reduced to being some animal. And if that's not happening in level 3, how do you think it's going to play out when you're in costume on stage, spotlights and cameras? There's 300 people watching you, and every single one of them is going to remember your name and face. They're not. They're going to forget it by 10 minutes later, right? They're not, right? It's just, but you're going to think that. And so you're going to be, this is my one chance to show that I am also amazing. And it's not. This is your one chance to show the world how amazing your partner is. You are there to make your opponent look good. Which you can't do if you don't have the skills. You have to have posture. You have to have grace. You have to have an accurate understanding of measure and volume and line so you don't accidentally take their face off. And it does go wrong from time to time. But when it goes wrong, if the safety nets are in place, it's all right. At worst, it will be a bruise. Maybe a split lip. All right, but you're not sending anyone to hospital because you've got skills. And if you're so busy looking at yourself in the mirror and taking selfies as you fight, you're not present. You are absent. And that is where it all goes horribly, horribly wrong. Right? And this is why anybody without insurance who wants to fight one of our people at a Comic-Con, you say no. They say, I want to fight. You say, join the army. Insurance, safety kit, adjudicators, referees, and seconds. That is the process for dueling. If somebody challenges you, it's a duel. It has to be arranged properly. No nonsense. Huh?
What about in the car park later?
Just take your jacket off, make sure I've got nothing to do with it, right? Right. Mastery of technique, right. Students are encouraged to design their own outfits made to a standard worthy of the stage, yet flexible and sturdy enough to withstand the pressures of combat. This is not easy at all. I do strongly recommend that you find people who are really good with a sewing machine and you pay them a chunk of money to do this for you. Otherwise, it's going to take you a year to learn the tailoring skills before you actually put together a costume that isn't going to fall off you in the middle of a fight. Level 5 assessment will include stagecraft and mindfulness. This is situational awareness. This is understanding how to use volume, not to open up the defenses of your opponent, but to present a nice profile to the audience. You just simply change your perspective, but it's the same technology, volume and measure. You need to appreciate that if the measure gets close, it might be lethal and it might win you the fight, but the crowd can't see anything anymore because the swords have become lost between the bodies. Even if you're out of measure, you can still make it look convincing because there's movement and dynamism in what we're doing. Cooperative combat. If you get hit, you die. Right? Just be nice to the person who worked so hard to get that kill, right? Cooperative combat. Say again?
Let them do the cool thing.
Let them do the cool thing. If you made the zig when you should have zagged, and you're like, oh dear, this is gonna hurt, right? Make it look like it hurt. Tell my mother I loved her. Right? Make your opponent look good. They are doing exactly the same thing back to you, which requires what? Trust. Trust.
Don't faint until you can't finish the fight.
Yes, don't do that. No fainting, no tricks. This is initiative, right? Fainting is a way of manipulating initiative. Binding is a way of manipulating initiative. Switching to unarmed is a way of manipulating initiative. That's why it always feels sudden when it happens, right? Initiative is level 3. And I've had to introduce it because it's at level 5 where in combat, do you know what? If you don't have a good understanding of initiative, but you're taking 20 cuts to every one that the opponent's taking, you're going to win. You're going to win. But in display, if your initiative understanding is absent, then it's impossible for you to put on a good show. You're either both attacking at the same time, which looks rubbish, or you're both standing there staring going, is it your turn? Is it my turn? Right, which also looks rubbish. Right, so initiative has to come in there. Initiative and cooperative combat, they go together hand in hand like this. To have that sense for when your opponent is giving you the grace to take the lead. You have to take it. You don't know why they're giving the lead to you. They might have seen something behind you that you aren't aware of. So they're giving you the lead. You have to take it. You have to recognize that you've been given the baton. Similarly, somebody decides to take it off you forcefully when you were in mid-flow, let them take it. There's a reason they're taking it. There's something that's happening that will look awesome. Let it happen. If I get bound out of the way, if I get booted in the tummy, I'm going to look up surprised and wait for my head to come off. Make them look good. Cooperative combat, very different. You are never going to be able to do this if you are still too obsessed with your own reflection. There is a complete spiritual transformation in the soul, mystical mumbo jumbo, before this is going to happen. You have to learn to meditate, because quite often the need to sort of, dominate is a biological imperative that comes from pre-sentient times. We are more sophisticated than that. As an organism, the human race is a multicellular thing. And if you think of yourself as just being a lone self, the lone wolf, the myth that doesn't exist, you'll notice that somebody else made your shoes. You did not grow your own food. Doesn't matter how much you want to be the greatest or the best, you're just one of us. You have to meditate in order to put away the part of you that insists that everybody has to bow. Yeah. Cooperative combat. It's just a bullet point on slide number 12. But that is a lifetime of work, humility, love. You have to love your opponent more than you want to be loved yourself, which is hard.
Don't step into the play arena wanting to win.
No.
Because that's when it all goes wrong. And it's obvious. When two people are peacocking in the middle of the ring, it is so obvious and it looks cool.
I've had, for example, a good example of cooperative combat. Like, guys, think of it this way. If it's 3-on-1, who do you want to win? As the crowd, who do you want to win? Right? Now, if that one in the middle cuts down 2 of those fighters and it switches to a one-on-one, right? Now we can play it around a little bit, the things. But if those 2 fighters, who that sole fighter cut down, refuse to accept the cuts, what the hell is the one in the middle going to do? Oh, we just watched a snuff flick. 3 people came in and murdered the dude in the middle. All the children are thinking, their mummy. Right? But if it happens that you end up in a 3-on-1 and you are one of the group, come on, guys, get over it. Your mummy will still love you even if you lose this fight. It doesn't matter. But again, we see people are so desperate for their 15 minutes of fame, that they will be prepared to take that 15 minutes of fame, even if it was 15 minutes of shame. Right? Give it up. Give it up. Let it go. Costuming. It's got to be film standard, guys. It can't be cut up jeans. It can't be any of that crap, right? There are still costumes in the team that we let go because, quite frankly, I don't have the choice of anybody better. But if I did, your costumes, they need to be ironed. They need to be starched, right? If they're not and they're dirty and whatever, it's because that is the aesthetic you're representing. Yeah, you want to turn up as a scavenger, fine, but you better still smell nice. Right? Right, advanced cutting, slicing, drawing, cutting through. This is retarding the arc of the cut. If you're delivering a cut on a horizontal plane, right, it's quite hard for the audience to really see what your target is, and it's very easy to retard the arc to make it look like you intended to cut them, but you missed. This is slicing, drawing, and cutting through. For these methods, you can quite easily go to the 4-finger grip. Okay, because you're not chopping and you're not thrusting. Silhouetting. I'll go over that in detail later. I'm not going over. This is really important. Where is your arc of cut targeting? I am always trying to cut around the silhouette of the target. If I'm doing a rising cut, it's going to rise up past the side of the target all the way through to the sky. And as far as the audience are going to look, that person going like this, literally just missed them, but it didn't. It was about 2 foot off to that side, right? Silhouetting. Your saber cuts should only be targeting the body of your opponent if you have decided it's time to win. And believe me, if 2 people decide it's time to win at the same time, if they've put on a good show, it's about to get better. Right? Flourishing. I am not going to teach you this stuff, guys. You can go to Michelle Smith's YouTube channel and she can teach you how to spin and do turbo flips and all the rest of that kind of stuff, right? Whatever you like, you are all going to flourish the way that you want to flourish. You might...
Tai Chi master, you can't teach us how to spin. You won't teach us how to spin.
I won't. There's not enough time, there's not enough days in the year, right? And quite frankly, you don't want to be doing that in a group class anyway. You're going to drop your saber 50 times learning to spin, right? And you want to do that secretly at home by yourself. Yeah, right?
I can smack myself in the face.
You also want a soft surface when you say this.
Yeah, right? So flourishing, to be honest, is, I don't flourish. I don't personally deliberately do it. Yeah.
It's like a little cat and donkey kicks.
That's just, I don't deliberately decide to flourish. There's an energy moving through the body and it needs to express itself. And if I look at you and you make me do this, right?
I don't flourish, flourishes.
That's not a flourish, that was a wield into a new guard.
You don't flourish
Right.
in the middle of an engagement. You set yourself up to do that. You still can't do it.
Yeah, always.
See both of them, look at them.
Yes.
All I'm going to say is I am, in fact, wearing my maul belt, right, today. And you just enjoy it. Be yourself. Look good. entertain the people. And if your flourish is a cartwheel, yeah, or a tornado kick, right? Whatever. But the rule is this: you only do what you've practiced 10,000 times once the cameras start rolling. You do not experiment live. All right? If you don't know it, if you can't do it with your eyes shut, it has no place in a display. None. Right? Because you can't take the risk that if it's interpreted incorrectly and you're unsure of it, there's a chance that Sabre's going into the crowd hilt first. Yeah? All right. And finally, solo form. All 6 sections.
A much more boring question. Costuming. Who do we run that past? I assume it's owner or yourself or Shell.
No. Owner is now into a hiatus. She's going to be taking a couple of years off on a deep level, and she's just going to be engaging with us as and when she can, because she's got to sort her kids out for the next phase of their life, and they've moved out of London. We're not going to see much of her, but just send her as much love as you can. What this unfortunately means is that I get to pick on. I am now the judge of your clothing.
It's fine. I just don't want to make something and then be panicked for the next 2 hours.
Let me be clear.
We do have a guide, which is still in place, and I'll share the guide. It is actually on the student.
Yeah, so it's all there.
Follow the guide, and this is fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's just I'm my biggest critic, so
If I print out, run it past one of us, run it past me, and I'll say, I'll at least tell you.
You were there when I was following the first text.
Always show us the drawings first, right?
It's not
Okay.
a matter of don't fly off the shelf. Try and come up with stuff new.
But what we find works best is a sort of blend of the two. Buy off the shelf and adapt it, right? Making from scratch, if you know, my shoulders are really sloped. So I find that anything I buy off the shelf actually comes out and looks like a shoulder pad, right? So I that's why I you know, it's a necessity. That's why wearing ethnic clothing for me isn't like a cultural choice. It's just that Western clothes are designed for people who walk around like this all day. And I just don't walk like that. Right, okay. Successfully completing level 5 qualifies a student to apply for inclusion in a display team and for an instructor to start their own team in their own club. A team of level 5 students is capable of safely delivering spontaneous, unchoreographed displays of combat. They should be able to adapt to a variety of environments and situations and need to maintain a constant state of readiness in order to do so. You can't train at the last minute for a display that's happening 3 weeks from now. You have to keep it up the whole year round. Otherwise, when the gig drops in your lap, you ain't ready. You're like, wait, I need to do my 6-week diet to get back into my costume. It's like, what? We ain't got 6 weeks. Either you're ready tomorrow or you ain't. And that is why we command a high price for corporate events now.
To do group form as well.
No. It's understood that you can do a group form if you can do the solo form. If you can't do the solo form, you shouldn't be in the group form on a display.
No,
If
I mean, you can do the solo form and actually fall apart on finding the new group.
True. I could add that. Yeah, I could add that. But the priority for me, as seeing an individual's progression, is that they first need to be able to do that by themselves, the whole form, all 6 sections, right? Once they've done that, it's actually only 2 additional protocols that you need to introduce to their form to give them the awareness to look at what's in front of them before you don't start a movement before the person that you see in front of you starts that movement. As long as that condition is met, the whole group will move as a shoal, right? And you'll notice that on Sundays, for example, in the association, the classes, what we tend to do is one instructor at the front will run the pace, and they keep the pace regardless of what anybody else is doing. So anybody else turns around, and if they're not in sync with that one instructor, they know that they've either accelerated or slowed down. That is different. That is somebody setting a metronome at the beginning of the class with their breath, and the whole form is then going to continue all the way through. That is the instructor showing those students how to maintain a pace and a mindfulness through the entire thing. When you're doing a group form as a display, it's more wushu than it is qigong. And for that reason, you need to introduce those protocols which externalize the mind to become much more aware of what the group is doing as a whole. And that is a slightly separate thing. I would argue this comes first. In the first place, they need to get it right. And we'll just get through that. No, I'm going back over here now. Right. Display teams must train together regularly in order to develop a familiarity with each other, and there are absolutely no shortcuts when it comes to ensuring good practice and safety. So if you aren't training with your colleagues at least once a week, as a professional team, at the higher ends of the global kind of offering of lightsaber combat, and I do mean global, you know, once a week isn't training. Once a week is just ticking the box. As a professional team, you should be training 2 or 3 times a week for about 2 hours minimum per session. Now, if you can't get together with your colleagues, then the one time in the week when we do get together should be completely dedicated to that team building and that working together. And that means that you have to do outside of class all of the work that we've talked about so far that is part of your solo practice. Because when you get into class, you've only got an hour and a half on Fridays, for example. And now if you spend that hour and a half display fighting, it will literally feel like 10 minutes. It will literally feel like 10 minutes. And then we'll turn up on, and then I'll be like, right, okay, you're doing this wrong. I need you to correct it. This is the technique, and I'm going to show you half an hour. That's now you've only got 60 minutes left of display time. Now, if you don't practice that correction in the next 6 days, and you turn up next Friday with the same mistake evidenced every single time, I'm going to have to stop the display fight, bring it over here. You can't do that unless you get this technique right. And now we've only got 45 minutes of that week left for display fighting. And so what happens is that if one person on the team doesn't do their work, the whole team loses their display time. And I'm not good enough as an instructor to be able to juggle that on the spot. I literally have to truncate what we're doing, say, no, I'm not going into, just get over there, do this drill, and then we'll go back next week and do it again. So you've got to individually support the team's effort by making sure that you've done your homework before Friday turns up, or Sunday as the case for display fighting normally. Right, fight performances are generally conducted wearing costume and with minimal protection. So it is essential that any participants are trained correctly and have earned the right to be on stage by demonstrating control and correct intent. Being part of a display team is considered a privilege that is only afforded to the most dedicated and hardworking of students. Academies and clubs with a level 5 instructor should be able to prepare for shows and events where they get to perform in front of audience without choreographing the fights. Level 6. At this stage, to deepen one's understanding of the kinesiology and biomechanics that forms the basis for the external syllabus, it is advisable that students undertake a study of basic anatomy and physiology. The level 6 assessment will require a student to demonstrate an understanding of the skeletal system and the major bones, the major muscle groups, the biology of muscle fibers, functions of tendons and ligaments, insertions and origins of tendons and ligaments, actions, agonists and antagonists, the aerobic, anaerobic and creating phosphate fuel circuits, the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the physiological transformations and the timescales associated with different tissues that you're trying to change. These chapters are essential for any students that intend to customize the syllabus to fit particular needs, especially when dealing with learning difficulties, injuries, or disabilities. They are also essential when creating bespoke programs for athletes and competitors and ensure a lower incident rate as well as accelerating recovery because the student has a better understanding of which muscles and joints are involved in every technique, why injuries occur, and what each injury requires for healing.
Sorry, this is a really good question. What's endocrine?
Endocrine is your hormones, right? So endocrine system is really, it's almost slow motion compared to the other two primary information networks. It basically is your body releases a hormone and gradually across the body the information is received and a change takes place. You need to understand adrenaline, cortisol, how they affect your intellect, how they affect your body. It's fine. Right, instructor's advice. This model of training is essentially the same as any diploma level study of the human body, similar to the kind of training a personal trainer or a massage therapist is expected to complete. There is no limit to the time it takes to complete the module, so each student is free to advance at their own pace and study in whatever manner suits them the most. Online learning or class-based learning are both acceptable, and other methods as well, provided at the end of the day that the required knowledge is absorbed, understood, and applied in class. I don't care how you study it. If I point, you should be able to know that bone, these muscles, these actions. Done. It's not that hard. You just need to relax, open your mind, and give yourself time. There are games that you can play that are designed for 6-year-olds, like to map a lot of this stuff. My Jibril was able to name all of the major skeleton bones and muscle groups by the time he was 6 years old, and just because I downloaded the thing on his iPad. It's simple. It's
the best one you ever get, especially for vision, is the anatomy colouring book.
right.
So good.
Anatomy colouring book. Go and get it. Look. Yeah.
Just because my biology is basically my biology knowledge is based on how many times I've been hit by different cars.
No. Listen, look. If you want to pick Paul's brains, right?
I mean, it has its fun.
Listen, Paul's an acupuncturist. Acupuncturists' understanding of anatomy is second only to surgeons. In fact, I'd say it's higher. Surgeons get to see as they cut what's going on. Acupuncturists have to thread between the veins and the arteries and the nerves without actually being inside you. So they're pretty interesting. Right, the instructor's advice. Have I done all of this?
Last paragraph.
It is advisable that candidates start their study of level 6 as early as possible and should not wait until the completion of level 5 before they begin, which is a common theme that you're seeing running through. Right, last one. Level 7, the body. Yeah, and there's lots of good stuff out there, right? The mind. Right, by the time a student arrives at level 7, they should have been practicing stillness since their very first class. So you realize, oh, hang on a second, the very first thing we talk about in level 1 is actually level 7 content. But we introduce it in level 1 because it's going to take them all the years through to level 7 before they're going to actually be able to manifest that, unless they're naturally born miraculously as little baby monks or something, right? It does happen. You do meet people who are naturally brilliant at everything, right? There's a price that everyone pays for their superpowers, but, be aware that you will come across people with superpowers. And when you do, don't be jealous. Don't get upset because they have it and you don't. You don't know what you've got and they don't, right? Just work with them. You'll still find a way to help them to get better. Right, by the time a student arrives at level 7, they should have been practicing stillness since their very first class. Students will learn how to manage their fight or flight responses and to deal with panic before it starts to affect their ability to function. So again, we're actually talking about things that we were assessing in level 3. Right, in level 3 in tournament, we were talking about the same thing, but here it's been extracted from combat and it's become a thing unto itself. This is achieved by studying the traditional Qigong independently. And then these practices are transplanted back into their combat and fight performances. At this stage, The focus on training is the development of one's awareness and the ability to tune out all irrelevant influences, distilling the mind to the immediate circumstance and environment, both internally and externally. Do you remember we were talking about exams at the beginning of this morning, right? This is what this is talking about. Can you understand where you are and choose what it is that you should be focusing on? Because believe me, if I wanted to pick Suleiman's pocket, I would arrange for somebody to drive past slowly in a really nice Ferrari. And while he's staring at it with his jaw hanging out like this, that's right.
Everyone's getting it wrong.
Yeah, so this is where you start to become aware of people who are trying to manipulate you into frames of thought. Because when you're still, you can see those little prods and pokes as they guide you through. If somebody holds up something you want and waves it under your nose and just leads you out the door into the middle of the street, where was your mind? Why weren't you asking the question? I know they're giving me what I want. What do they want? Where was that question? It is at this level that students are introduced to the classical Tai Chi origins of the Silver Sabres program in their original form at level 7. The level 7 assessment will include sitting meditation. I am 30 years into training and I still find this to be nothing but torment. Nothing but torment. I know. Standing meditation, right? Standing meditation I find easier because the physical ordeal that's associated with it is something for my overactive brain to get invested in, right? Sitting is harder. Standing is pretty easy. It hurts, but it's easy. The Eternal Spring Qigong, which is probably by the time we are actually doing this as a separate study, going to be replaced, because this is a deeply medical system, and as much as it is universal and it's lovely, I think Michael has now begun to appreciate our syllabus as being a distinct thing unto itself, and I believe he's going to develop a Qigong set that is specifically for sword artists. I don't know what it's going to look like. For the time being, this is just a place saver, Eternal Spring Qigong. You'll notice I open a lot of classes with just the first 4 or 5 movements of that anyway, so you kind of already know it. 8 spheres Qigong is simply to hold the postures of the cuts at the final moments of the cuts, whatever posture with the body, but you have to have that final extension, grip and everything correct. And then the Wuxi, Tai Chi, Chuan Chuan Dao with steel. Which? So I did it with this on, I originally started writing the form with this blade back in 2015, and I was right, this was the right one to do it with. It doesn't look very much like a lightsaber, but the movement of this sword is huge arcs and slices. And indeed, if you start with this one from here like this, and you change from sword fingers to the palm, you go from the reverse grip here, doesn't work with a big knife like this, you take the cradle grip here. This, for everybody who has the technology of the form already in their body, this is, you should be able to just pick this up. Kiana, I want you to, after we do this session, I wouldn't mind watching you do this. I think your form is smooth enough that the translation should slip very naturally in. You're going to find as you switch to steel to do the exact form, there's no changes in the form, the two-handed longsword form and the manifestation of it through this. None. There are no false edge cuts in our form, so it won't matter that this is a single-edged blade. The other weapon that you should also be able to immediately translate our work into, and this is level 7 again, is obviously the European longsword. And just so that everybody's clear, obviously, because it was the language of the original trilogy. Yeah, the actors who were trained to fight with lightsabers in episodes 4, 5, and 6 would have been trained theatrically with a longsword, right? That.
Have you seen the fight before?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I am fighting.
Yeah, I have. I didn't say they were very good, right? It definitely wasn't small sword, right? We agreed it wasn't Polish saber, right? It wasn't small sword. It was German longsword, basically, done very badly. And you start to see it being done particularly well by episode 5. The fight on Bespin is actually absolutely amazing. And the other piece of steel that you therefore need to be able to deliver all of this technology with is a hand-and-a-half longsword with a. I like the canted crosses, but you know, if you can do a straight cross, why not? Okay, that's the essential first part of. I'm just going to go through this and then we're going to take a break. Okay, so this is the journey, and level 1 and level 2. Actually, you can do all of that stuff online. And we can teach instructors who can, what does level 1 let you do? Level 1, if you pass your level 1 as an instructor, this is the instructor course, right? It makes you an events assistant. You can help out at events. You can go to schools and just give a one-off trial session so people can see what LED Sabre is all about. But basically, it allows you to just assist at events. And it's a day. It takes a day to do the course, right? And the level 2 assessment, as an instructor, you can teach a term in school easily, right? 6 steps to walking, 6 sixes, 1 step, 1 cut, plus all the level 1 stuff. That's 10 weeks with a group of 14-year-olds or 9-year-olds easily. Gyms, you get your level 2 instructor, you can start opening a class in gyms. You can open your own club. Find a venue, church hall, school hall, whatever, open your own club. You've got enough material that by the time your students have finished the level 2, you should be already into getting ready to teach them the level 3 stuff. And at events, you are actually a lead instructor. That's because you now have enough understanding to be able to make corrections to people who are assisting you, as well as the students who they're assisting. Right, level 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you can only really pick up this information if you are in class in person, right? Level 3, obviously it now means you can teach a multi-term contract at a school because you are taking them through the initial content, and then at level in level 3 you can start the second term in that school with a competitive format for fighting. You can obviously also do refereeing, and you can apply to join your tourney teams and run your own tournament teams as well. Level 4 is the first time somebody who passes a level 4 assessment is the first time we give people the opportunity to be a franchised SSCA academy. If they're instructors at level 3, 2, or 1, they're not SSCA. They're not Silver Sabres until they're teaching at level 4+. They're just LED Sabre enthusiasts and clubs who we have helped, but we don't want them to be claiming to be us because they're not. You can do level 1, 2, and 3, even the way we teach it, really badly, and it's still technically correct. There's no way to get through level 4 badly. It has to be done absolutely on the money. You can also do 1, 2, and 3 in less than a year. You could probably do it in 6 months, instructor training, if you did a couple of times a week. But at level 4, you know, that's an 18 months, 2-year journey. There's no way it's going to happen. Level 5, as a qualified display instructor, you can teach drama classes in school. You can teach choreographies if needed. You can teach performances to people who are required to deliver lines in costume. You're qualified to do that. You're also able to apply for stunt work, mocap work, and to join the display team. That's level 5. So everybody's on the display team thinking, oh my God. It's like, yeah, you're not really on the display team yet. Nobody is. It's just that, again, we haven't got a season of students who are so mature that they can actually complete all of everything up to this point so they can arrive there and say they've ticked all the boxes. We're just doing the best we can with what we've got at the moment. Level 6 allows you to be a therapeutic instructor. This means someone phones you up and say, I fell off a ladder, I've been in hospital for 6 weeks, I need to learn how to walk again. You are now qualified and insured therapeutically to take them on that journey. Right? Level 7, special needs instructor. So if you understand your own mind well enough, if you can see the processes and the components of thought and how they come together and form ideas in your own head, and you're not going to do that if you're too busy talking to yourself. You have to shut up, right? You have to shut up, sit back, and just watch the thoughts form in your own mind. You're like, dude, that's just a bit meta. It is. It's meta programming. The computer that programs itself is alive. If you are not meta programming, you are just an organic bot doing what other people have programmed you to do. If you wish to make changes, you have to be aware of how the thoughts emerge in your own head. I'm not asking you to know where they come from, because I don't think they come from anywhere. I count them as blessings, but you have to see how they form and how they come together. And that will allow you to then reflect on the nature of someone who's not like yourself. They might have different wiring, but neurology is neurology. It doesn't matter if you're a dinosaur or if you're Homo sapiens sapien. The way potassium and sodium transitions across the membrane of a neuron is the same and has been the same. It hasn't changed, which is why even an animal that repeats the same thing will achieve kung fu, because kung fu takes place in the neurological connections in the synapses of your brain. Right? Level 7, the mind, special needs instructor. If you haven't done that journey through your own crazy, what are you going to do? You're going to walk in and say, do it like me. But they can't do it like you. Teach it for them, not for you. But if you can't understand them, you can't teach it for them. I should have underneath here put how many pounds per hour each of these instructors is worth, right? I'm not going to lie, a special needs instructor is worth £100 an hour, minimum.
They'll actually get paid, however.
Yeah.
If you go to parents who've got a comfortable job in the city and they got a house in Islington up the road and they've got a kid with special needs, they will pay £100 an hour like that for the chance of that child having a happy life. Like that. No two ways about it. Forget working for the public sector, right? That's not going to happen for another 10 years. We've got work to do. We've got to get the syllabus GCSE-ified, right? We've got to have all kinds of stuff in place before we're going to have funding for the public sector. This is about private sector. This is the only people who can afford this are people who are well off.
On this scale, 5, 6, 7, from the perspective of the academy, that's where your skills are at to do those things, but certainly some of the stuff in 5, definitely the stuff in 6 and 7 also may well need verification and different insurance.
Yes, yeah. Look, if you're a therapeutic instructor, you have to be insured as a therapist as well, right? And that, incidentally, for me, also insures me for special needs, and I do that through a separate insurance from. I have insurance as a therapeutic Tai Chi instructor, and I have insurance as a professional martial artist, and they're distinct. And then I have a separate insurance as a massage therapist as well.
For those of us who one day want to aspire to like either being a special needs instructor or a therapeutic instructor, what would there be recommendations for like courses that we need to take insurance if we need to buy close.
We can talk about that. I mean, if you're not in education already, if you've left that, then you can do diplomas like in the evenings that will teach you physiology and anatomy. I'm not going to lie though, the only thing I'm going to accept for the level 7 assessments is you're going to be required to go through the syllabus that Michael writes, and there is nothing out there that will do that. You are literally going to have to sign up to the association and attend seminars that Michael teaches. And at some point, I will notice in the room that the tone of your aura has changed as you connect to things around you in a different way. And the effect that's going to have on the people that you connect with is going to be tangible. You'll see them lifting themselves out of confusion with that support. And that's something that only happens when you stop being just yourself and you start being a part of them as well. And that, like I said, that's what we're talking about here. It's not just about a perspective. It's about a way of being. And it doesn't happen when you turn up and see them. That way of being is something that happens when you open your eyes, you get out of bed and you put your feet on the floor, and your feet are the floor, and the breath you take, you are the air in your lungs. This is a persistent state of awareness that I don't trust myself to teach yet. I would ask you humbly to chase Michael for that. And of course he is, of course he is. But that's why we do level 3. No, I want you to step in the ring and not lose your shit. Right, okay, let's take a break. Any questions before we...
Simon asked earlier, he said, is there any recommended study material for level 6? But I think people should just, if they come across a good book or a good app,
Yeah.
share them on the student group.
Yeah.
Everyone can just...
Yes, can we start a thread and label it as being level 6, right? And then anybody who does...
Start looking at it now.
Yeah. Right, so what anybody can do, they can join a student group, and then they can look for certain tags, and it will bring up all the stuff, yeah. All right, everyone back in situ. Taylor, I need you back.
What did you get?
Let everybody...
Chicken, meatballs.
Okay, so chicken and meatballs.
I can smell the chicken, that's how I...
You can smell the chicken. Okay, we've started again. So chicken and meatballs can stay today. Chicken and meatballs. All right, from here. Okay, I'm just going to burble at you again, wall of text. All right, I'll stop for breath where I can. I think I've gone over this with everybody a couple of times already. Is audio running and everything's good? Yeah, la. Right, okay. Okay, the Silver Sabre syllabus has evolved substantially over the years and is based on decades of research into traditional martial arts and historical combat methods. As a consequence, we have opted for a teaching method that is true to the philosophy of our practice. The simplest observation is that in order for the instructor to transmit successfully to any students, there has to be a feedback mechanism which allows for continual assessment of the student's readiness for advancement. You can't just drop it in their lap and expect them to get it. You have to build the structure bit by bit, foundation first, then the next level, until eventually they're in a place where they can start to get complicated ideas and string them together. And the only way you can do that is if you're paying attention to them rather than to yourself, right? So with physical literacy, and we've said this before, it is not enough to simply have the knowledge. It takes time for the neurology to adapt to new instructions and to actually be able to manifest the skills. And then it takes further time for the tissues of the body to adapt to make the movements fluent. And the simplest observation is you can go and watch a YouTube video on how to play the guitar, and after watching the video, you don't know how to play the guitar. It's not enough to have the knowledge, the physical skills and the change of the body to allow you to do certain things takes time. This means that even if a lesson has been understood intellectually, the student is not ready to move on until the lesson can be demonstrated with the familiarity and competence that can only come from repetitive practice. All this means is that different people will progress at different speeds. Again, we don't judge them. We don't judge them, because it took me 4 years to learn my first form, 3.5. And that wasn't because Michael was making it up as he went along like I was trying to do. It was because it took me 3.5 years to learn to organize my head into a way which would allow me to memorize 108 different movements in a sequence with every nuance in the right place. It took me forever, right? Michael never judged me for that. He never told me I was a rubbish student because it took me a long time. He never praised me for being a brilliant student for the bits which I got right. And I am aware of the fact that can be a little distant, and sometimes it's better if you do say to people you're doing really well or you're not doing very well about this or that, which has another consequence of people suddenly becoming aware of their relative merits and failings, and they start to compare each other to each other, which is not the intention. Absolute transparency is just absolute transparency. It doesn't come with judgment. It's just the truth. 2 + 2 is 4. But the philosophy of the syllabus has to basically allow us to take people from a place where they're struggling and put them in a place where things are easier. And how long that takes is going to be different for each person. Again, why? Because some people have physiological disabilities, some people have cognitive disabilities, some people are really busy. If someone's got 3 kids, then they're going to take them ages to learn the form because they can't practice at home, right? Other people, they might have fallen off their bike or something and they've gone back 3 levels for 4 months, right? It takes everybody a different amount of time. The most important thing as an instructor is that whatever they turn up with, you have to make them feel like it's safe for them to be vulnerable. Because in order to expose yourself to the losing that is your learning, in order to expose yourself to the opportunity to admit you don't understand something, that's when the door opens for you to learn it, is when you admit that you don't know it. And that is a moment of vulnerability. As an instructor, you have to make that moment of vulnerability a safe place for somebody. It's tricky. Everybody's different. What works for one person will be catastrophically undoing for somebody else. In some instances, you need to say to somebody, that was brilliant, do it again. But if it's somebody who already thinks too much of themselves and you tell them that they're brilliant, they go, I'm brilliant, I'm going to go have a beer. They didn't do it again. If you tell them, no, that was wrong, do it again. They're like, oh, I don't want to be wrong, I'll do it again. But if you tell somebody who's already been told their entire life that everything they did was wrong, and you go into and say, no, that's wrong, do it again. I'm never going to get it. I don't know why I'm here. And you've lost them. So this sensitivity, this feedback mechanism between you and the soul that is in front of you that's asking for some assistance. And remember, it's a two-way street, because every time one of these students teaches you something new about human nature or interpersonal relationships, you are also a better human being because you've had that moment with that person. I didn't know certain things about people until I started to teach people. It was all assumption. And then you're like, wait, what do you mean you don't have an inner monologue? How do you not have thoughts? But pictures? You have thoughts in pictures? How does that work? That stuff doesn't work for me. Wow, you're different. Wow, you're different. Okay. So the way I learned isn't going to work for you. I'll be back. Give me a month. And for a month, I'm not going to sleep. I'm going to imagine being somebody who doesn't have the ability to think the thoughts in words in my head. I'm going to imagine that I can only see them as pictures. How do I teach that person? I have to improve myself in order to help them improve themselves. Philosophy of the syllabus. Right. Because our syllabus is delivered in such a broad range of institutions and to such an incredibly diverse audience, it is simply not practical to set out timelines for progress or scripted lesson plans. Instead, we have opted for a system that employs an exercise matrix. This is possibly the most radical part of our syllabus, and it's the culmination of all of my life's work, really, is to turn it into a grid. And I'll come to that in a moment. It is something that can be applied easily to any other form of learning. And I'm amazed that it's not commonplace. But the reality is that education is normally defined by people who find education very difficult. And in very few places do you see people with special needs writing the syllabuses. And the reason it should be left to people who struggle with the syllabus to write the syllabus is because they're the ones who are going to make it very clear what needs to be done in what order. If you find something very natural and easy to do, the chances are you'll say, yeah, we just do it. It's like, well, if you know the way, then it's to say, yeah, it's easy. You just go there. So if you know the way, of course it's easy. If you don't know the way, you need exact instructions, right? So we have opted for a system that employs an exercise matrix. This way, the instructor is not referencing a calendar when planning the lesson, but rather is forced to consider the ability and progress of the students on an individual basis and the amount of practice they have completed. If a particular exercise cannot be demonstrated with confidence, it simply means that the class is not ready to progress. And if they are having difficulty with a particular aspect of any movement, the matrix makes it easy to go back and work specifically on the elements that are deficient. In this manner, a holistic training program emerges specific to each group or individual. We strongly believe that this will promote excellence in practice, and we have recorded positive results in existing classes from all age ranges and abilities, regardless of any learning difficulties or physical injuries. The only thing that really changes is the duration that people individually spend in each exercise. It's obviously going to take longer if you have trouble with something, and if you're a natural with something, you might be through it in one lesson. Rest assured that because the syllabus is holistic, doesn't matter who you are, I will find something in the syllabus that will make you want to cry. It's there. Where are we? Because progress is tailored, the students enjoy a steady learning curve and can observe their own progress, leading to higher retention rates in class. There is simply no way to teach on autopilot with this system. So what I'm saying there is because we tailor it to each person, they should be able to observe their own progress relative to where they were last week. If you just set up a bunch of hoops for people to jump through and they can't jump through it, there's not really very much progress. You just set them up with an impossible task. They're going to bounce off a vertical learning curve, and eventually that is so soul destroying, it's going to quit. So you have to give them it incrementally so that they can gradually approach the impossible task and break it down into smaller digestible chunks. So there are 5 maxims that Master Ma over here, over there, in the picture, he has his lifetime of practice. And the philosophy of our syllabus is very much designed to allow us to engage with Master Ma's 5 maxims, right? Really simply. Number 1, perseverance. The first hurdle is finding the discipline required to finish what you start. Do not quit. The art is impossibly deep. Impossibly deep. Too much for any one person in any one lifetime to know it all. And at times the journey will be bitter. But each step brings you a tiny bit closer. Find excuses to train instead of finding excuses not to train, until training ceases to be a thing and is just part of your life. And Master Ma's disciple, Master Lili Kun, or Lili Chun, who was Michael's teacher, he said that training is nothing more than just like eating rice. And you're like, what? You have to remember he's Chinese. He had rice for breakfast. He had rice for lunch. He had rice for dessert. He had rice for dinner. And we're like, oh yeah, Friday, training day, dee-dee-dee. Right? And you're like, no. It's just 7 o'clock. That's all. It's just training. It's no different to brushing your teeth. It should be so normal. If your training is still a special event in your weekday, you're not training enough. You're not training enough. If you notice when you're training and when you're not training, you're not training at all. You're only training if you're always training. Any less than that, and you're just a tourist. 24/7. Sitting on a chair in school, head up, breath to the belly, shoulders down. It's no different to holding a sword. It's just a pen. Exactness. That's supposed to say inch. And right.
Corrected in the shared PDF.
It's a fairly good British medium.
Practice with mindfulness. Exactness is sometimes, I've seen it called precision. Right? Understand the instructions and make your best effort to follow the instructions precisely for every single moment of every single repetition. Every single moment of every single repetition. Because if you miss by an inch, you miss by a mile. If you're out by an inch at the beginning of the movement, here's my single whip from the unarmed form, right? Now, if I'm like this at the beginning, then there's no way that I can arrive in the correct position at the end, because what I put into the algorithm at the beginning was wrong. So what I get out at the end is going to be wrong. You can't do it roughly. If you don't have the capacity to do it mindfully, don't do it. Because if you do it wrong, what have you taught your body? How to do it wrong. Either you're going to make the effort to get it right, or don't do it. Yeah, if you're going to persevere, then you have to persevere with the correct practice. Endless repetitions of the wrong thing will wreck you and put you in hospital. Right? This is why I have no time for sports. No time for sports. Get the alphabet right first. Sort your handwriting out first. Then show me your fan fiction. Right? Don't just scribble it down. Slowness. Now this is tough. This one comes back constantly, over and over. Train the body to be sensitive to tiny changes, tiny, minute. Move slowly, experiencing every shift, every breath, feeling as the body dissolves tension and distributes forces. Sudden movements are always of a lower resolution for the purpose of study, whilst slow demands strength, stamina, and balance. Anyone can do something roughly right quickly. If you're not slow, how can you be exact? If you're not slow, how can you be exact? If you're not exact, what the hell are you doing? You don't need to pay me to come in to show you how to do it exactly if you don't give a damn. And I don't want them in the class if they don't give a damn. Because that give a damn, it's going to spread. It's going to spread. One person doesn't give a damn, everybody will not give a damn. So go home. This is our space. Why are you here? Slow down. Every tiny change in the body echoes through you like an earthquake. But you won't feel it if you're moving so fast. Slow down so you can make sure it's correct. Lightness. Lightness. It's very Jedi. Sith don't do lightness. You'll notice when you portray a Sith that your footsteps are different to that of a Jedi. The way you hold your head is different. The movements must be achieved with the minimum investment of energy. Minimum. Release all the tension. Move with the minimal muscular contraction to be free from excess. The face must be free of frowning. The head remains suspended from above, whilst the center sinks towards the earth. Lightness. Heavy. Light. We talk about reeling silk in Tai Chi all the time. But the truth is that not very many people living in London or the UK have ever reeled silk. So nobody knows what that means or what it feels like. But there's a nice analogy you can make. Reeling silk is no different to, imagine trying to take a spider's web from somewhere where it shouldn't be and just wholesale, just taking it off and moving it somewhere else and putting it back without messing up the shape of that spider's web, right? If you'll walk through a spider's web, everyone's walked through a spider's web at some point in their days, right? And it sticks to you and it's just like, what the hell, where is the spider? Get it off me. If you pull on the spider strand too fast, what happens to it? It snaps, right? And if you don't hold it in tension, it turns into a lump of mess. There's a very precise way that you fill your body with an energy that allows you to just hear the tension in the spider web as you move it and play with the strands. And this feeling of not being too fast, not being too slow, listening to the tissues of your body and moving at the speed that allows them to unwind is known as reeling silk. And it's very integral in this idea of lightness. Now, there's another aspect to lightness. That's looking at it on a physical level. We're going to look at it as you're standing on the earth kind of level. Your head has to be lifting. As soon as I cut this thread, it's heavy again. So I'm just going to reconnect it. And I'm going to drop the bass. And it instantly changes the quality of contact between my feet and the ground. So this has to be in there constantly. But obviously, you're not going to find lightness, which is this expansion upwards, unless you've slowed it down. And you're not going to be able to slow it down if you're not paying attention to exactly what you're doing. And you're not going to be able to pay attention to exactly what you're doing if you gave up. Right, so this is Master Ma's maxims. These are the overall meta philosophies that allow you to become a more intelligent human being, which you don't learn by just being violent or studying Krav Maga or whatever. You have to actually come to the martial side. Finally, we have stillness. I'm not going to lie. I might be able to demonstrate it, but I don't know if I can explain it. I don't know if it can be explained. With all the components in place, even martial movements expressed with full intent will possess a softness that is born from stillness. Even whilst moving, it is as if one is standing still, all parts balanced, all parts together. And I absolutely mean that on the inside, between the top of my head and the connection to the ground, when I'm moving at full speed, if I'm getting it absolutely correct, there are no shadows inside my body where I folded or collapsed. It remains as if I was standing still in the standing practice. The joint, every joint remains open. The head is expanding, the bum is sinking, the connection through to the ground. There's no movement, really. I might be doing a somersault in real life, but on the inside, it's no different to me as if I was standing still. That's a difficult place to get to. And you know, that, can you get there without going through level 3? No. The highest part of level 7. Master Ma was a bruiser. This guy would stand up in his 90s in the park and take challenges. In his 90s. Does anyone even know a 90-year-old? Let alone a 90-year-old who will put you on your ass again and again. Our culture excludes us from this. Because in order for us to accept that our 90-year-olds are not as capable as they could be, or that we have neglected them once they retired, we would have to admit failings as a society. And people don't like to admit that they were wrong. So even though this technology has been with us here in the West for over 100 years, when was the last time any of you had a conversation with an 80-year-old? Point made? Right? Yeah, you're Indian. We don't live that way. We're here to show everybody else how it should be done, right? They're the natives and we're the colonists now, right?
The roles have been reversed.
It's the brown man's burden. Teaching them to look after their parents. Yeah. Say again?
My father-in-law a few weeks ago, but it's the same conversation 6 times.
Right, right. Master Lee, even when he was here in his 80s, he would go off on tangents way more bizarre than I go on. He's off. But I tell you this for a fact, in his 80s, he knew he had one foot on where he left, and he would bring us back without going, where was I? Right? So, I mean, these people led from the front. They absolutely demonstrated from their own that this works. You follow this, look what I can do. I'm 83, I'm 86, I'm 77. Michael is nearly 70 years old now. Michael is nearly 70. Lynn is 70 something. Right? Michael hits like a truck. And when he hits, you never know where it's coming from. You always find out it's happening after it's happened. That's intellect. And the hitting like a truck, that's body. He's nearly 70. Right? The only other people I know who have that capacity are all under the age of 40, and not a single one of them has the whole package. I know some people who are quite clever, but they don't have the meat to back it up. I know some people who are quite violent, but they don't have the intellect to back it up. To get the complete package takes a lifetime. Complete package takes a lifetime. It takes a lifetime of daily practice as well. Okay. I'm going to go through the exercise matrix, and this is entirely for those people who haven't seen it before. And then after that, I think I'm done because it's already 3:30, so it's going to take about half an hour. Yeah, you know this. It's all right, chill. Yeah, if you listen and you get questions, everybody who's not been through this several times with me, I mean, hell, you haven't been through this. You were here when I wrote it on me. Yeah, I know, right? So, you know, the exercise matrix is kind of what it's all about, and this is what really releases you from the dogma of teaching. The matrix is just a guideline. It does not require that you move through the exercises in a linear fashion, and is designed to give you freedom to move around the grid as you feel is appropriate for your students. In particular, when working with younger children or students with special needs or injuries, it is often better if you explore alternative routes from exercise 1 to 21. It is also of great importance to understand that the matrix simply represents the most essential practices in the process. Instructors with more experience teaching students with greater initial aptitude are welcome and expected to introduce more sophisticated elements into the matrix. If necessary, it's easy to strip away anything that proves too difficult and return to the base layer of the matrix. The sophisticated elements can be reintroduced once progress is back on track. The key ingredient is the instructor's familiarity with the content. Without a thorough understanding, it's simply not possible to be creative without sacrificing efficacy. This is your matrix. This is the latest version of the matrix. It hasn't changed much in the last 3 or 4 years. It's really moving this into the level 4 format, which is what's been the focus since we entered lockdown. Level 1 is here, the first row. Level 2 is the following 4 rows, and then level 3 just on its own is just sparring exercise 22 over there. Say again? Retreating? Yeah. It's gone. No retreating before level 4. Yeah? Because otherwise people are just doing this. Right? No retreating till level 4. We would take the Russian attitude. If I see you running the wrong way, I'll shoot you myself. Yeah? All right, so what we've got, you've got each column and you've got the rows. Along the top, we have without hands, doing the basic wields, the basic parries, the basic cuts, random cuts, and the partner exercises. And then coming down the rows, we've got mother stance to start with, back stance, forward stance, the transitions, walking the advance, and walking the thwarting. And that all culminates finally with exercise 22, which is just to go and do some free sparring. Yes. Were there questions? I thought so. I had. Okay, no, don't worry. Don't. Right. Okay. So what have we got here? Anybody doesn't understand how this works? Are you two familiar with this? You understand how it goes? We've done it all over again and again and again. Anybody who doesn't understand basic premise behind the exercise matrix? Anybody online?
Black and white, actually.
Suleiman,
Why are there 2 5s?
are there 2 5s?
Yeah. I think that's
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It was like 14, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's got, should be 14.
yeah.
No, that's a 14.
I'm actually editing the live file. I've got the live file.
That is a 14, it should be rather than anything else. Now the assessments you can see, in level 1, we made that one blue as well actually, Shell. Box 5, the partner exercise up there, that's the same colour as 21 and 16, because that's an assessment. So as we're going through this, you need to get them through their assessment points here, and then you're going to take them through these exercises 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You then have to check their walking, 6 steps to walking. So where would you do, actually 6 is also an assessment, Shell. So box 5 and 6 will be blue. Yeah?
The one that everyone's online sees.
All right, okay. So exercise number 5 is where you would check for people's 100 head cuts, 100 lateral cuts. That's the level 1 assessment. You can literally just set up a partner exercise. There's 5 pairs of people doing their thing, and you're doing 10 assessments in that next 5 minutes. And it doesn't take more than 5 minutes. If they're taking longer than 5 minutes to do 100 head cuts and 100 lateral cuts, to be honest, that's not really a pass, right? It's not really a pass. The pass should just be, just get on with it, do it. Your sixes are no hands in back stance. So from here, they have to demonstrate all of the leg methods in this box here, number 6. And that's why they're called the 6 sixes, because there are 6 of them and they are exercise 6 on the grid. Coming down afterwards, you're then going to lace those back stances together with the wields, the parries, and the cuts. Right, after you've done those, you'll introduce the forward stance with the same thing again, with the parries, the wields, and the cuts, right? After you've done the 2 stances, you then have the transition between, from sit back to the forward stance, and that is obviously going to arrive from the transitions. We simply move into a place where we're teaching the walking as a continuous chain of events, right? That broken down method then allows us to teach the basic cuts with the extension and the cut as discrete phases. And because we're breaking down the cut into the extension and the cut, we can then tie that and lace it together with the footwork. So the extension happens with the foot sealing downwards, and the cut takes place specifically with the transition. 1, 2, 3. And this is then the complete sequence neurologically, which has to be coded and delivered into the spine so that it happens as a single execution, hands and feet bound together with a single trigger that governs both the synaptic pathways. One governing the hands, one governing the feet. You create one bridge across the 2, and you only need to pull the trigger for the bridge because it will take care of all the other stuff that triggers as a subroutine off that. That's really, I'm talking my language. I don't know if anybody else got that. Did you get it? Right, makes sense? Once we've got walking down pat, we introduce the thwarting, and I don't really need to test that because you can see 21 is 1 step, 1 cut, the step cut exercise. In order to do 21 correctly at the end of their level 2 assessment, they have to A, have good posture, B, always be at good measure, C, always try to create the volume, and D, have an awareness of line. Do not be always cutting against an opposition. Do not try and parry with a parallel, right? These are simple considerations. And that's kind of the actual grid itself. Boz, do you have any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty self-explanatory. And if you understand this, then...
It's just the method of applying to a class at different levels.
The only thing to do, my earnest advice to anybody who wants to set up a class is, a lot of the time people are like, oh, I don't want to do it because I can't really guarantee I'm going to get more than 2 or 3 people. You know, I'm going to lose money in the first 6 months because it's not enough to run the hall and stuff. And it's like, no, You don't think of it that way. Thank God. It's going to take me 6 months before there's going to be enough people in this class to notice that I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. Right? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to start the class, and really what I'm doing is here's £1,000 to pay for the rent for the next 6 months, and that's my solo practice space on a Thursday night for 6 months. And if anybody else happens to come along, bonus, right? That's how you think about setting up a class, because it's going to be that 6 months of you being in that space and going through this stuff just for yourself or with the 1 or 2 people in that class with you before you're going to be competent enough and comfortable enough and fluent enough that if 8 people turn up and sign up for the next course, you can deliver it at a level which is going to reassure them such that they renew their subscription.
Yeah, is there a particularly deep meaning to light grey versus dark grey, or is it just
the dark greys are the core exercises, and the light greys are the combinations that emerge when you put them together. Right? The blues are assessment boxes.
Probably have a little key.
I will. Yeah. Anyone? Any more questions before I move on? I don't know if there's any more to do. Everyone's looking really tired. The feeling I'm getting off the room is that essentially the learning phase of today is done.
The rest of the bit's all principle.
I don't think. All right. So if I go back to the index from here, I am going to. All right. So that's the formal. What we needed to get through today done, right? If we go on to the actual matrix and look at each individual exercise in the matrix, we can talk about each box on that matrix is an hour, 2 hours worth of debate and commentary and blah, blah, blah. I'm not doing that today. This is not teaching technical how to do a cut, how to do a walk. This is to give you an overview of the Academy's kind of meta structure, how the syllabus is supposed to work, what its objectives are, and why it's arranged in the way that it is, and what it offers that you're not going to get from any of the other more traditional orthodox sports and physical exercise routes. Right? Can you see how much of what we've talked about is mindfulness? It runs through the syllabus like Brighton through a stick of rock. And all I'm going to say is, like, you know, at the end of the day, if you look around the world at the number of people who've got jobs that they should not be doing, it's all to do with mindfulness. It's all to do with mindfulness. It doesn't matter what you choose to be amazing at in your life. If you get that and you get to introduce that into any one thing in your life, you can then copy and paste and transfer that template across to anything else that you find particularly difficult. So building that template across something as incredibly complex as a 99 move form, yeah, ancient, from a different culture, with a sword, that is a deeply, deeply troubling task, because it has to bring your mind, body, and spirit together into a single unified intention. It's hard. Okay. All I want to do now is anybody has any questions on any of these boxes. Otherwise, I'm pretty much happy to call it a day. Let me just quickly check. Code of conduct, everybody knows. Sabre and equipment, I'm going backwards. Sabre and equipment, everybody knows. LSOT rules, I'm not going to go over.
They're on the website.
Yeah. Introduction, I've gone over in persons. Combat, 7 levels, master, maxims, and so.
Questions
Yeah, grip and initiative are the only 2 I want to go over. Yeah.
level 4. Like that's the closest thing we've got to a grade. How are you going to demonstrate that?
I'll stand with the deck of cards. No, there'll be 20 people, and I'll throw the cards. I might. Yeah. I might even make them all do it blindfolded. I don't know yet. You think I'm joking? Yes.
What's the initiative?
I'll come to that in a second. Any more? I'm only going to cover correct grip and initiative today.
From Oh, they want to know when the PDF is coming out.
It's been tweaked because, oh, guess what, I'm not getting anywhere. You said you wait to add some stuff in Paul, but Paul said he's got a few corrections he wants to make.
Yes. Okay. So just very briefly, I'll send out the PDF as it currently stands. As a mathematician, I always show my lines of working. I have no qualms about giving you the work in progress so that you can appreciate and understand how much of the blanks I still have to fill in. You'll get the PDF as it is. There is an additional document that is quite hardcore, which is something that Paul Silk has been working on for a couple of years. And the reason for that is that he's the one who's been taking it to special needs institutions and earning good money teaching people how to control their thoughts and to apply some discipline to their cognitive processes. He's the one who's got the autistics through to the end of level 2.
Do you still want me to go through a video of manipulative terminology?
Anybody, there is a glossary. There is a glossary at the end of this manual, which isn't in there yet because it's just a list of words that need defining. There
Yes,
are.
because I remember the last time you showed me one, I first thought it was just a glossary, and said there is one, here's a glossary, and it's a list of words with no definition.
Yes.
That's not a glossary.
It is.
It's a list of things that
It
need
is.
to be in the glossary.
Look, just because I use white ink on a white background for the descriptions, it doesn't mean that it's not a glossary.
Because you can highlight that word.
It's every novel, I'm never reading it.
It's a picture book.
That's fine, I think you read it.
Right? Okay, from here. So what have I got? Correct grip and initiative. So correct grip. The first thing I just quickly need to go, I'm just going to show this on the, right. This is the grip that you would use on a hammer. Tung, tung, tung. I've got my thumb to the forefinger and my 3 fingers are loose. The cradle, as I extend the sword forwards, is actually the crook of my forefinger. And this is, you know, it's a totally valid method. You'll see, you know, cricketers, tennis players. It's just a way of holding things. But what happens is this: is that as you fully extend, you can't really get the hilt in line with the forearm because of the compression in the bottom part of the wrist here. So what you actually have to do is you'll notice that when I'm holding my saber, I tend to hold with the thumb to the middle finger, and then I allow my forefinger to open that gap there. It's really quite soft. And now when I extend, the forefinger becomes the thing that prevents hyperextension, and the actual cradle and fulcrum is that first section of the middle finger. So the sword is turning around and is balanced on the first part of the middle finger between the middle finger and the thumb, and it rests in her gu, right? Now, this is very different to, I understand, like a wakizashi or any of the more Japanese swords. I'm not sure I've never studied that art form particularly. I understand that with slicing and cutting actions that the forefinger method is acceptable, but the long sword in particular needs to be able to reach out at full length, and that requires that the forearm and the hilt become parallel. And in order to get that full length, you really need to make sure that you are holding the saber properly. If you're holding it too tight, which the thumb to forefinger will almost certainly force upon you, is an excessive tightness in your grip. It's not flexible enough. You switch to thumb to middle finger, and the saber can rotate around the center of your palm to a certain extent, and this will allow for a little bit more flexibility, one hand or two hand. It doesn't make any difference, right? Initiative, unless anybody's...
Does that put the grip slide up?
Can I? I can just push the button, can't I?
Yay, well.
Right? So you can see, it's the middle finger. It's the middle finger. There's a separation between the first finger and the middle finger. You're not going to have your hand like a club fist. It's not you're not punching. This is natural. This is natural. What you're going to find in general, I haven't had to tell Titus to do this. I haven't had to tell him to do this. It's only people who've told themselves that it's something else who introduce the unnatural shapes. People who don't think about it too much and just let it be, they tend to just naturally find this. Where did Titus learn to do the relaxed grip? Right? Just spinning. You have to relax your hands.
If you draw it back to the Japanese, the way we teach to rest across the tips of the two.
Both?
Yeah, so that way you can lean into both hands.
Right?
I didn't want to go to that club.
Right? Thumbs connect to forefingers and / or middle fingers. Now, the only correction specifically I'd like you to do is that the bias is towards the middle finger. Hopefully, if you're teaching this, they're going to be on the forefinger anyway, right? On the middle finger anyway, right? So the bias, certainly on the right hand anyway, is that the thumb is the middle finger, with the forefinger becoming an optional extra. It's more restricted, and I don't care. I don't think either is easier. And the proof of the pudding is that a lot of people that I haven't specifically mentioned it, can you see how this is the fist part, and that finger is separate there as well. So he's got the correct grip, and the reason he's doing that is because he came to us from spinning, and a lot of spinners, the mistake they make is that they're too open with their hands, and they're doing this, and they're actually not even holding the sword in her gu. They're holding it in the fingertips, right? Now this is okay on the pommel hand. At times, it's absolutely unacceptable for the fulcrum hand. It has to rest in that valley there, and whilst it's resting in that valley, you then have to seal it with that band, and that's the middle finger there. And this allows me to wield this weapon, and I'm really not expressing a large amount of movement through the wrist. There's this palm opening here, which is a forearm rotation, and the rest is fingers. There's not a lot of movement in the wrist at all, okay? So, all right, and it doesn't change for the level 1 and 2 syllabus. There will be times and places in level 4 and beyond when you're going to need to change. You know, you might even release the right hand entirely to get a cheeky extra range pommel.
Could you show the grip nearer the screen, Simon?
Aha.
Andrew,
Andrew, no, you have to get your ass up.
tread on him.
That's it. I can't see if it's there. It is. So can you see? Thumb to middle finger. I'm going to wrap the two last fingers to keep it nice and comfy, and the forefinger is just going to so I'm kind of cradling like this. Right? I'm going to cradle it like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that exact same thing, but I'm going to give you it on a sword. And it's here. So you can see, I'm now going to move my hand slightly further away so that the forefinger is supporting the crossguard thus. Right, and you can see I'm actually holding, even on, I'm now hide that finger so it's not exposed. I'm going to roll that in, and I can have the hand like this, and I have that much room to rotate the sword around Lao Kung because I'm sealing it thumb to middle finger. There's the holding, and there's the forefinger, which is giving me a very, very clear indication of where the cross guard is. And if we now take a look at that on an actual jump, and on an actual jump, I would be holding this like this here. And so in all defensive situations, all I'm doing is I just need to be aware of the leading edge of that forefinger, because anything that I do where I intercept with my forefinger now is going to automatically introduce a cross in opposition against the incoming attacks. And that's why essentially you need that forefinger, which is most closely associated to your mind. You know, if you talk about one part of your body, not that part, that is very, very closely linked to your mind, it is your forefinger. This is the thing you pick your nose with. This is the thing that you type with, right? You need a better nose, right? If your nose is deficient, you have to use your little finger, right? So your forefinger is the most direct link to your brain, right? It is literally, it's the most live. You know, your tip of your tongue is also pretty up there because you can't make mistakes when you're eating. You choke, you die, right? Fingertips though, right? So this is the thing. So if the cut's coming in here, I'm wiping it aside with that forefinger. Here, 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 right? So all we do with the weapon is the forefinger is replaced with the cross, right? The forefinger is replaced by the cross. So I take my hand here and I'm just going to zip. Now I've got that cross printed in my head as being an extension of that first knuckle. I can now fold that finger back in and leave myself connected thumb to middle finger with the forefinger nice and loose, allowing me to adapt and change my grip as I go. Happy? Okay.
I'm not thinking about different grips on different swords now. I feel like I've aged this.
Yeah, different weapons have different grips.
No, that's not Andrew. If you want to live, you will not stop that conversation.
Right, it's a very long conversation. And like I said before, you know, different weapons are designed to be used with different hand grips. And getting the grip wrong is, it has huge consequences to the measure that you can extend to with the two-handed LED saber.
And to one which you fail to kind of demonstrate correct grip intent, depending on the wielding style.
Right? It's quite important. I think I should have been a lot clearer about it a lot sooner. It's only very recently that I've realized, you know what it is when you've been doing something for 30 years, you forget what it was like when you first started.
This is why I can't teach dance.
I know. I know. It's because you're a brilliant dancer, Melissa. If you were a rubbish dancer who'd been doing it this long, you'd be an amazing dance teacher.
I teach Sabre because I remember what it is to learn, but I can't teach dance, and I remember.
Yeah, right. So this is me. I was taught the grip stuff in detail in about 2002 or something. And I just totally forgot to make a point of it. Even though, as you can see, it's in the manual, black and white, clear as day, right? I just don't make a point of correcting it. And because I didn't correct it, I possibly left Michelle and Andrew, both of them slicing when they should be chopping for a year longer than they should have done. And it's really annoying. It's really annoying because I'm the one who's been watching both of you going, I don't understand. How much easier can I make?
How are you putting it like hard?
Yeah.
And you're looking at us like,
how are you not pulling it out?
We're not. And you're like, use that finger. Suddenly we were like,
oh, yeah, I know.
Dude.
I know. But to right, look, I'm just gonna quietly look. I wrote this in 2015. That line hasn't changed since 2015.
And I do that in Dow, because the Dow naturally
Yep.
forces that finger to come to play.
Yep.
Changed my grip, but I never really thought about as to why until like that conversation started on Friday, even though I've been grading people on how they hold their swords.
Taylor, you know, you are absolutely natural with the sword, right? And it emerges when I watch you fight, right? Every time I give you the room to think about what you're trying to do, your self-deprecation kicks off, and then all of a sudden you're kicking yourself in the teeth when you're down. And it's only because I gave you the room to think about it. As soon as I take that away, I'm like, here, do this, do that, and then off you go. Friday, I didn't see you stop. You just trained the entire time, and you just left, leaving this trail of little stars behind you like this. It's great, right? Just chill. Everything's good. You just got to let yourself appreciate the bits where you know what you're doing and not worry about the bits where you don't. Because those bits are making their way. They're just not here yet. Just lost luggage, right? It's on the way. Right. Not that one. Index. Initiative. Right. Last one. 5 to 4. 3 to 4. I'll try and get this through. Right? Initiative. I'm not going into this in detail. I'm just going to give you an overall look at it. The reason for that is this, is that, you know, to understand initiative, we need to be standing up with sabres in our hand and doing play fighting, right? If we're not doing light sparring, it's very hard to talk about initiative. But I'm going to give you the intellectual property that is associated with it now, right? Initiative is a concept that helps us to understand the changes in tempo and rhythm of an engagement. Initiative exists whether or not a fighter is aware of it, and is in fact easiest to spot when it is absent. When two fighters attack at the same time, they have both assumed the initiative. They are both yang. When two fighters hesitate at the same time, they are both refusing to take the initiative. They are both yin. To become aware of initiative, a fighter has to step outside of their own thoughts and become present in the here and now, situationally aware, environmentally conscious, sticking to and following their opponent, adapting as required to the subtle changes of yin and yang. And you can see that this is not possible if Master Ma's 5 maxims are not being followed. All you are left with are two dogs trying to see who can bark the loudest. If you want to have a dialogue where the more intellectual is going to exceed and succeed over the brute, then it has to come through technology, right? You have to step outside of your own thoughts. Without dialogue, without sensitivity, without connection, there is no art, right? Boz, take a step towards me. He stopped.
Is it too big?
Right? That if he moves, I move. Now, I'm only watching him out of the corner of my eye now. I'm even doing the cross steps as I need to, right? But that dialogue is there automatically. That dialogue exists without me having to think about it, even while I'm being blinded by the projector, right? That measure to measure, right? Was I thinking about what to say, or was I watching him? Thinking about what to say. What part of me was taking care of watching him? My subconscious, right? My subconscious was then connected to my legs and my feet, and thus as he advanced towards me, they were automatically, what the sense I get of, it's right, quite tricky to talk about this stuff because it is quite esoteric. We're talking about the 6 senses that exist inside the body. We don't just have 5 senses, we've got a lot more than that. But most of it is processed through the subconscious. It's only the 5 primary senses that you process directly into the conscious mind. I have to train that relationship actively for years. And then slowly I take that entire perfect construction, lift it out of the part of my brain that likes to have a name, and deliver it onto the part of me that wants to be a fish. Oh yeah, right? And that part of me doesn't need me to tell it what to do. It's already taking care of the fact my heart has to beat a certain number of times a minute. It's already taking care of the fact I have to breathe. It's already making my food pass through my guts or not, depending on my level of stress. There are so many systems in my frame that are completely not available to me as a volitional intellect. I can't choose whether or not I want to digest my food. I can have coffee or not, but that's like a second-hand influence, right? When we talk about initiative, what I feel as somebody steps towards me is literally like around them, there are layers of a bubble. And as they step towards me, as more and more that layer is closer and closer to the core of their body, I feel it like a wave against the side of my body. That is now, after 30 years of training, how my body interprets that subliminal information and delivers it to my volitional mind so that I can respond to something without having to look at the mechanisms involved. I've now got a shortcut. Look, when you get angry, that is a very complicated series of logical steps, which after 1 billion years of evolution, your body has simply said, if these circumstances are satisfied, you need to act. Don't think about it, just be. And there's a reason that results in anger. Now, it's misinterpreted and abused by advertising and whatever else, and the need to, we have to go to war, so hate all those people over there. And everybody goes, yes! And that's the abuse of those mechanisms. Fear. You're standing next to a cliff edge. You're like, I don't feel quite right about this. You're not supposed to feel quite right about this. You can sit there and go, yes, the specific gravity is 9.81 meters per second, and that means I will fall for about 15 seconds before I hit the ground at about 200 miles an hour, and I should create a patch of about 15 square meters when I puddle at the bottom, right? You can go through all that process, or you can do this. Right? That's fear. It's a shortcut. It's a shortcut. If you lose your bowels as you look at that, that is your body saying, look, you don't have time to think about this. Step back. Right? Emotions are shortcuts to very complicated strings of logic. Now, your job is to make sure that they're clear and clean and free from distortion and misappropriation. And you see it in people's behavior with the most strange things. Watch people, how they behave when it comes to a football match. Try and figure out the evolutionary origins for that. Look at how people behave at election time. Look at tribalism. Understand its evolutionary origins and see how it utterly destroys any attempt at unity that the human race might aspire to in 2022. Now we've got issues, we've got beef. This, when we talk about initiative, we're talking about feelings. We're talking about emotions. A sense of fear as he steps towards me. A sense of opportunity as he retreats, which I have to interpret not as emotional responses, but as physical responses in my body. That's a reflex. And it's not a conscious decision I'm making anymore. It now exists in the earlier phases of my evolutionary brain, not even mind, brain. This is physical, neurological. These are cells in your body that have been coded that way generation after generation for 500 million years. Right. When your opponent becomes yin, you should become yang. There are times when this is not true. It's a general rule. If someone becomes yin, respond with yang. And if somebody becomes yang, respond with yin. Fight fire with water, my friend. You should become yin. One will always, yang and yin and yang. One will always lead to the other. And all opportunities will present themselves in time if we are open to them. You can't force that door open. You might want to bind to destroy their defense and get in there, but you still have to wait for the opportunity to bind. You can't bind them when it's not a bindable situation. Be patient. Your strategy is to bind. You still have to wait for the moment when that's possible. Surrender the initiative until they collapse into a place where you can take it back. Initiative is closely related to flow. And flow depends on a natural movement through the joints to prevent any kinetic disruptions or separations. If you block yourself with the way you're moving, your initiative dissolves and your opponent has a free open goal shot. If you separate, if you throw your sword so far away from the center of your body, and I don't mean in distance, I mean in connection, by the time you gather that back, they've had 3 free cuts on you. Right? At some point in the journey, the sword becomes a part of you. And for those of you that find stillness, even your opponent will become a part of you. All I'm going to close with is once you've achieved that, you're a healer. Once you achieve that, you're a healer. Because if you can connect and become a part of your opponent, partner, friend, student, teacher, whoever, right, you're in a position to help and understand. That is why we have the academy. Because if we can connect to each other in a network that spans time and space, we've done it. We've solved climate change. We've got off the planet. We'll cure cancer. There's nothing we can't do. But we can't do it whilst we're too busy fighting over nothing. Right? Yeah? Do you understand? And the only way you can teach that connection, this is the irony, that connection, and I've studied a lot in my life. You have to understand that by the time I decided to leave astrophysics to become a martial artist, I had already been searching for answers since I was 13. I wrote my first thesis on black holes. Right? It's taken me a while to get to the point where we understand that the martial arts is the crucible for self-improvement that everybody wants but doesn't engage in. Because you can choose to improve yourself from the aspect of your body or your mind or your soul, but until they're all working in harmony together, it's just vanity. It's just something to talk about in the pub, right? Until you bring it all together. You're like, where do you need to do that? In the ring. It's the only place you need it all coming together. If the spirit's broken, you've lost. If the mind is absent, you've lost. If the body is weak, you've lost. You don't have to be the strongest or the cleverest or whatever. You just have to have all your shit together. Anybody who gets it all together, whatever the components are, but brings it together, will beat anybody who hasn't. Doesn't matter how strong or clever or fast. If they haven't got that unity across mind, body, and spirit, dinner time. Right? That's what you're trying to do. And once you get that for yourself, then you realize everybody you meet who hasn't got it, you see what they're missing. Right? And the other crazy thing is this. Remember what I said at the beginning about cycles, triangles and circles? You're going to achieve this in glimpses. Nobody's going to get to change the channel and live in that world forever. We're humans. We're all failing constantly. You're going to get glimpses of this that are going to guide you back to where you should be going. You're not going to be able to maintain this all the time. You just need to get glimpses, enough glimpses a day or a lifetime to keep you from getting deluded by your own nonsense. That's it. Map that out across the world. Imagine that in schools. Start teaching that to 5-year-olds. How long before we have world peace? At least 2 generations after we start teaching it to 5-year-olds. That's still not enough time to solve climate change. So get busy. Get out there. All right. Any questions?
Wait, in case anyone online has any? Off them to the camera?
Nah, I'm knackered. I think I'm done. I had to read out the slides that I spent 6 years writing.
You didn't even read them all, you literally like.
Yeah, there's loads more.
There's like a third that you got through.
LSOT rules. Nah, everything else everybody can read by themselves. All of that technical content will be done in class with Sabres and stuff. All right, let's wrap it up, everybody. Say goodbye to everybody online. Goodbye, everybody online.
Hi, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.